don't care how corny it sounds, I'll never stop being a lover boy. Not until I get the kind of love I've always imagined. The kind where there is no one else, no distractions, no half-interest, just one person in a world that feels smaller because of it. I want that kind of love where it doesn't wander, where nobody else even registers, where loving them feels natural, not forced. The kind of love that feels cinematic without trying. Just two people driving nowhere, standing in open fields, traveling for no reason other than wanting to be together. The kind of love you don't just feel in your chest, you feel it in your soul, hot, intense, alive. And I don't understand how people walk around acting indifferent to that. Love is something casual, like it doesn't matter, because love is everything. Sharing the world with someone, learning their habits, knowing their moods, understanding them in ways nobody else does. Going from strangers to someone you can't imagine life without, there's nothing like it. And yeah, love comes with risk, heartbreak, loss, pain, but I'm here for all of it, because if that's the price of loving deeply, I'll pay it. I'll take the heartbreak, I'll take the uncertainty, I'll take the risk. The lover boy in me isn't dying. It can't. What makes it hard sometimes isn't loving deeply. It's loving deeply in a world that pretends not to care. People act like being attached is embarrassing, like wanting someone fully is something you should hide. They call it nonchalant. They call it cool. They call it protecting yourself. But to me, it just feels empty. I don't want love that's casual. I don't want half interest. I don't want to act like I wouldn't be crushed if I lost someone I care about. I want to feel it. I want the kind of love where my heart is all the way in. No exits, no backups, no pretending. And yeah, that makes me vulnerable. It means I get hurt easier. It means I feel things more intensely, but I'd rather feel everything than live numb just to look unbothered, because loving deeply isn't weakness, it's courage. It takes guts to say I want you fully. I'm choosing you. I'm not scared to care. And maybe that's why it feels lonely sometimes, because not everyone is built to love like that. But I am. And I'm not going to dull that part of me just to fit into a world that treats love like it's optional. Loving this way hurts more because you don't do it halfway. You don't keep one foot out the door. You don't love with conditions. You don't calculate how much to give. When you fall completely. And that means when things don't work out, it hits harder. You don't just lose a person, you lose the future you already imagined, the places you pictured going together, the version of yourself that only existed with them. People say, I don't get your hopes up, protect your hair less, but that's never been you. You don't know how to want someone quietly, you don't know how to love without meaning it, and you don't want to learn, because even when it hurts, loving deeply still feels better than pretending you don't care. Yeah, heartbreak changes you. It slows you down, makes you cautious for a while, but it never kills that part of you that believes in something more. And that's the difference. Some people close their hearts after pain. Others keep theirs open, not because they're naive, but because they refuse to let disappointment turn them cold. You don't love deeply because it's easy. You love deeply because that's who you are. And even when it costs you, you'd rather feel everything than live a life that feels empty. The truth is, you already know how this can end. You know love can break you. You know it can leave scars. You know it can take pieces you don't get back, and still you choose it. Not because you're reckless, not because you're desperate, but because a life without love feels smaller than a life with heartbreak. You're not chasing perfection, you're chasing connection. The kind that makes the world feel louder and quieter at the same time. The kind that turns ordinary moments into memories. The kind that makes you feel seen in ways words can't explain. People say love like that is unrealistic, that it only exists in movies or stories, but you've felt glimpses of it, enough to know it's real, and once you've felt that, you can't pretend you don't want it anymore. So yeah, you risk it again, you open your heart again, you believe again, not because you forgot the pain, but because you decided it wasn't stronger than your capacity to love. Being a lover boy doesn't mean you ignore reality, it means you face it and still choose love anyway when you say you want that kind of love. You're not talking about perfection. You're not chasing fantasy or some unrealistic fairy tale ending. You're talking about presence, the kind of love where you don't feel alone even when you're silent, where being together feels natural, not forced, where effort doesn't feel like work. Is waking up and knowing there's one person in the world who chooses you without hesitation, not because they have to, but because they want to. It's traveling with no plan and still feeling grounded, standing in open spaces and realizing the world feels fuller just because they're next to you. It's loyalty without fear, commitment without control, love that feels intense but never unsafe. That's the kind of love you want. Not obsession, not possession, connection. The kind where you don't question intentions, you don't wonder where you stand, you don't compete with distractions, you're just there, fully, openly chosen, and wanting that doesn't make you unrealistic, it makes you honest. Because once you know how deeply you can love, you stop settling for anything that asks you to dim that fire. Waiting doesn't scare you, settling does. You've seen what happens when people accept less than what they feel. They grow distant, they grow quiet, they start convincing themselves that good enough is enough, and you don't want that. You don't want a love that feels convenient. You don't want someone who chooses you only when it's easy. You want someone who stays when it's real, when it's messy, when it requires effort. So you wait, not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you know yourself. You know how deeply you love, you know how much you give, and you know what happens when that kind of heart ends up in the wrong hands. You'd rather be alone than feel lonely next to someone who doesn't meet you where you stand. And yeah, some days it gets heavy, watching people pair off, watching others settle into relationships that look fine on the surface, but deep down, you're not jealous. You're patient, because you're not searching for company, you're waiting for alignment, or someone who doesn't flinch at your intensity, who doesn't joke about your softness, who doesn't treat your loyalty like it's replaceable. You're waiting for someone who wants the same kind of love you do, all in, no exits, and until that shows up, you're not lowering your standards, you're protecting your heart. If it ever happens, when someone finally matches your energy, you'll feel the difference immediately. Not fireworks, not chaos, not anxiety disguised as excitement, clarity. You won't question where you stand. You won't wonder if you're asking for too much. You won't feel like you're loving harder than you're being loved. It'll feel mutual in a way you're not used to. They won't flinch at your intensity. They won't joke about you caring too much. They won't act overwhelmed by the way you love. They'll meet it. Your effort won't scare them. It'll reassure them. Your loyalty won't feel rare. It'll feel natural. And the craziest part, you won't feel like you're chasing anything. No convincing. No proving, no waiting for them to catch up emotionally. They'll already be there. And suddenly, all that waiting makes sense. All the times you didn't settle, all the times you walked away, all the times you chose being alone over being half-loved. You'll realize you weren't asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. When someone finally loves you the way you've always loved others, it won't feel overwhelming. It'll feel right. At the end of everything, after the waiting, the heartbreak, the disappointment, the almost, one thing never leaves: your capacity to love. You don't lose it, even when people try to convince you that you should, even when the world rewards detachment, even when acting unbothered looks easier, even when caring deeply costs you more than you expected, because loving fully was never a phase for you. It's part of who you are. You were built to feel things deeply, to choose one person and mean it, to love in a way that's intentional, loyal, and complete. And yeah, that makes you vulnerable, but it also makes you real. The lover boy in you survives every heartbreak, not because you forget the pain, but because you decide it's not stronger than your heart. You don't regret loving, you don't regret believing, you don't regret wanting something rare, because one day someone will meet you in that same place. They won't laugh at your intensity. They won't treat your love like it's extra. They won't ask you to tone it down. They'll recognize it, and when that happens, everything you held on to will make sense. So no, the lover boy in you doesn't die, he just waits. And when the right love finally arrives, he'll be ready. Sometimes I feel like love just isn't meant for me. Not in a dramatic way, not in a woe is me way, just quietly, like I've watched it find everyone else and somehow keep missing me. I've done the work, I've tried to heal, I've tried to be patient, I've tried to love right, and still, nothing sticks. People come close, but never close enough to stay. They show interest, but never intention. I'm always almost chosen, almost loved, almost enough. And after a while, you stop asking what's wrong with them and start asking what's wrong with you. You start wondering if maybe you're just built differently, if maybe you feel too deeply for a world that loves lightly. I don't think love avoids me because I'm unlovable. I think it avoids me because I don't fit into how people love now. I don't do casual well. I don't know how to care halfway. I don't know how to pretend I wouldn't be hurt if it ended. And that makes people uncomfortable. They like the idea of me. They like the attention, they like being wanted, but when it comes time to choose, to commit, to stay, they hesitate. So I end up alone again, not because I didn't try, but because I refuse to chase what doesn't choose me back. And that's the part no one talks about. Sometimes loving yourself means accepting that love might take longer to find you, or worse, that it might not come at all. And that's a scary thought because I don't want much. I don't want perfection. I don't want fantasy. I just want someone who stays, someone who doesn't get overwhelmed by sincerity, someone who doesn't confuse depth with pressure. But the longer time passes, the quieter that hope gets. Not gone, just tired. I don't hate love. I don't resent it. I'm just starting to wonder if it has a place for me, and if it doesn't, I guess I'll have to learn how to live a full life without it. Not because I stopped believing, but because believing started to hurt more than letting go. It's not even the loneliness that gets me anymore, it's the pattern. How people come into my life with energy and leave with excuses. How they swear they like me, but never enough to stay consistent. Never enough to choose me when it's not convenient. Never enough to make me feel secure. And I'm tired of hearing the same lines in different voices. I'm not ready. I'm focusing on myself. You deserve better. And maybe I do. But why does better never turn into someone who stays? At some point you stop feeling unlucky and start feeling singled out. Like love has an address, and somehow it keeps getting my name wrong. I watch people get loved loudly, chosen publicly, protected without asking, and me? I get almost commitment, almost consistency, almost somebody's favorite, and that almost does something to you. It makes you question your personality, your looks, your worth, your timing. Like if you could just fix one thing, love would finally land. But then the quiet truth hits. Love isn't avoiding me because I'm impossible to love. It's avoiding me because I don't accept half love anymore. And that scares people because I don't want casual comfort. I want real intention. I want someone who doesn't disappear when it gets deep. Someone who doesn't treat effort like a favor. Someone who doesn't love me in waves. And if that kind of love doesn't exist for me, then I guess the hardest thing I'll ever do is stop waiting for it to show up. Not because I'm bitter, because I'm tired. After a while, you stop getting excited when someone new shows up. Not because you don't want love, but because you don't trust it to stay. So you hold back without meaning to. You don't open all the way. You don't imagine futures anymore. You don't let yourself get attached too fast, because every time you did before, it ended the same way. Distance, silence, someone slowly pulling away while pretending nothing changed. So now you detach early. Not out of coldness, do you? Out of self-defense. You start preparing for the ending before the beginning even settles. You keep one foot out the door because history taught you that staying hopeful hurts more. And the worst part, people feel that. They sense your hesitation, your guardedness, your quiet expectation that this won't last, and they match it. They don't go all in, they don't invest deeply, they keep things light, flexible, undefined, which only confirms what you already believed. Love doesn't choose you fully, so the cycle repeats. You expect love to leave. Love senses you're bracing, no one commits, everyone walks away, and you're left wondering if love avoids you, or if you've learned not to trust it enough to let it stay. That's the cruel part. You didn't become distant because you don't care. You became distant because you cared, and it kept costing you. So now you protect yourself by expecting less, and every time love passes you by, it reinforces the same quiet thought. Maybe love isn't meant to find me. Maybe it's meant to pass through. Eventually, hope stops hurting loudly. It just fades. You don't cry about love anymore. You don't rant about it. You don't even talk about it much. You just stop expecting it. You start telling yourself that maybe love is for other people. People who are easier, people who don't feel as deeply, people who fit better into how relationships work now. And that belief settles in quietly. You still show up. You still try when someone new comes around. But there's a ceiling now. You don't let yourself dream past the present. You don't imagine forever. You don't let excitement get too loud. Because disappointment trained you, you learned that getting your hopes up only makes the fall harder. So you keep them low, manageable, contained. People think you're calm, they think you're chill, they think you're emotionally mature, but really you're just tired of believing in something that keeps proving you wrong. You start romanticizing independence, telling yourself you don't need love anyway, that you're better off alone, that attachment is overrated, and maybe part of that is true. But another part of you still aches when you see people chosen easily, loved openly, protected without asking. You don't envy them. You just wonder why it never seems to be you. And the scariest thought creeps in. What if this isn't a phase? What if this isn't healing? What if this is just acceptance? Acceptance that love won't find you no matter how patient you are, no matter how much you grow, no matter how carefully you love. So you make peace with the idea that maybe love isn't your story, and that peace feels less like relief and more like surrender. At some point, you stop chasing love altogether. Not in a dramatic, I'm done with love way, but in a quiet, tired way. You stop looking for it in rooms, stop expecting it in conversations, stop wondering if this person might finally be different. You still show up, you still talk, you still connect, but the hunger is gone. Not because you're fulfilled, but because you're exhausted. You've wanted love for so long that wanting it started to feel embarrassing, like asking for something that clearly wasn't meant to be yours. So you replace longing with numbness. You tell yourself you're fine, that you don't need anyone, that independence is better anyway. And some days you believe it, but other days it feels like you've just buried something alive. You don't get butterflies anymore. You don't get excited about potential. You don't let yourself feel anticipation, because anticipation has disappointed you too many times. People mistake this version of you for healed. They say you're strong. They say you're grounded. They say you've matured. But what they don't see is how much of that softness you had to shut down to survive. You didn't stop wanting love because you outgrew it. You stopped because wanting it started to hurt too much. And now you're in this strange in-between place. Not heartbroken, not hopeful, just waiting without believing. And the thought that scares you the most isn't being alone. It's wondering if you've waited so long that even if love did find you now, you wouldn't know how to let it in. Sometimes the thought hits you that maybe love did try to find you before, and that's harder to sit with than believing it never came at all, because then you have to ask yourself if you were too hurt to see it, too guarded to trust it, too used to disappointment to believe something good could last. You replay moments differently now. People who tried to get close, but you kept at arm's length. Connections you didn't fully invest in because you were already bracing for the end. Not because they were bad, but because you were tired. Tired of hoping, tired of opening up, tired of being the one who cared more. So you stayed cautious, you stayed reserved, you stayed prepared to lose, and maybe that protection kept you safe, but it also kept you distant. That realization stings because it means love wasn't always the one that failed to show up. Sometimes it showed up quietly and you were too wounded to let it stay. But even knowing that, you don't blame yourself. You were doing what you knew how to do to survive repeated disappointment. You weren't cold, you weren't careless, you were scared to believe again and have it fall apart like it always did. So you chose control over vulnerability, distance over hope, certainty over possibility. And now you're left wondering if love will ever feel safe enough again to recognize when it's real. That question lingers, not loudly, not urgently, just quietly in the back of your mind. At some point, fear quietly replaces hope, not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly. You stop expecting good things to last. You stop trusting excitement. You stop letting yourself believe that something real could finally choose you. So you protect your heart. At first, it feels smart, responsible, like growth. You don't overshare. You don't get attached too fast. You don't let people see how much you care. But over time, protection turns into distance. You're not just guarding against pain anymore. You're guarding against connection. You start filtering yourself, keeping conversations surface level, holding back emotions before they even have a chance to exist. And people feel that. They don't push deeper, they don't try harder. They assume you're not that interested, which feeds the same belief again. Love doesn't choose you. But what's really happening is that fear is deciding for you. Fear is telling you it's safer not to hope, safer not to want too much, safer not to open the door all the way. Because every time you opened it before, something left. So now you keep it cracked, just enough to say you tried, never enough to risk getting hurt again. And that's the quiet tragedy of it. You didn't stop believing in love because you don't care. You stopped because caring started to feel dangerous, and the longer fear sits in the driver's seat, the harder it becomes to remember what hope even felt like. Eventually you start telling yourself you're better off alone, not because you don't want love, but because wanting it feels pointless. You say things like, I'm used to being by myself, I don't need anyone, I'm fine the way I am. And part of that is true, you're strong on your own. You have learned how to survive without being chosen. You can build a life that doesn't depend on someone staying. But there's another part you don't talk about, the part that still wants to be seen, the part that still wants someone to stay without being asked, the part that wonders what it would feel like to finally be someone's first choice. So you compromise with yourself. You don't hope, but you don't fully let go either. You live in this middle space where love is something other people get, and you quietly prepare for a life without it. You stop imagining shared futures. You stop picturing growing old with someone. You plan your life around independence because that's the only constant you trust. And people admire you for it. They call you self-sufficient. They say you're unbothered. They think you're healed. But healing isn't supposed to feel like convincing yourself you don't want something you still ache for. You didn't choose solitude because it fulfilled you. You chose it because disappointment taught you not to expect more. And the scariest part, the longer you live like this, the more normal it feels. Love stops feeling like something missing and starts feeling like something unrealistic. And that's when you wonder if love didn't avoid you at all. If you just slowly stopped believing you were allowed to have it. The truth is, you never stopped wanting love. You just stopped admitting it. You tell yourself you're fine alone, that you've outgrown the need for romance, that you're focused on yourself now. But late at night, when everything's quiet, that truth shows up. You still imagine being chosen, still wonder what it would feel like to be someone's safe place, still crave a love that doesn't hesitate. You just don't say it out loud anymore. Because admitting you still want love feels dangerous. It feels like setting yourself up for disappointment again. Like reopening a door you worked so hard to close, so you downplay it, you joke about it, you bury it under independence and self-control. But wanting love never made you weak. Being hurt just taught you to hide that want better. You learned how to survive without being chosen, but survival was never the same as fulfillment, and deep down you know the difference. You didn't stop believing in love because you healed. You stopped because believing started to feel like self-betrayal. Like hoping for something that never came was making a fool of you. So you chose silence instead. But that silence doesn't mean you're done wanting love. It just means you're tired of wanting it alone. At some point, you have to face the question you've been avoiding this whole time. Is love really done with you, or are you done believing in it? Because the truth is, love didn't disappear overnight. It faded every time you were disappointed, every time someone almost chose you, every time you opened up and watched it fall apart again. Eventually, believing started to feel stupid, like hoping for something that clearly wasn't meant for you. So you stopped. Not because you stopped wanting love, but because you couldn't handle wanting it alone anymore. You told yourself this is just how life turned out, that some people get love and others learn how to live without it, and maybe that belief protected you. It kept you from more heartbreak, more waiting, more letting yourself down, but it also cost you something. It cost you the ability to imagine a future that includes being chosen. It cost you the courage to believe something good could stay. So now you stand here, not hopeless, not hopeful, just tired of wondering, tired of preparing for disappointment, tired of asking why love keeps missing you. And maybe the hardest truth is this: love didn't stop trying to find you. You just stopped leaving the door open, not because you're broken, not because you're unlovable, but because getting your hopes up hurt more than letting them go. And whether love ever finds you or not, one thing is clear now: you didn't lose because you loved too much. You lost because loving started to feel unsafe. So if love ever does come again, it won't be loud, it won't rush you, it won't demand you believe right away. It'll wait, and the real question won't be whether love finds you. It'll be whether you're willing to believe again when it does. Unrequited love is a quiet kind of pain, the kind that doesn't make noise. It just sits with you. It's loving someone who laughs with you, but never looks at you the way you look at them. They're comfortable around you. They trust you. They tell you things. And every time they talk about someone else, you smile, while something inside you cracks just a little more. You learn how to swallow words before they escape, compliments you never say, feelings you never confess, because deep down you already know the answer, so you love them quietly. You notice everything about them, their habits, their moods, the small details nobody else pays attention to, knowing full well you'll never live in their memory the way they live in yours. Somehow you convince yourself it's okay, that being close to them, even like this, is better than being without them at all. You give without expecting, you care without being chosen, you love without being loved back, and that hurts in ways you can't explain. But unrequited love teaches you something too. It shows you how deep your heart really is, how much you're capable of feeling, even when nothing is returned. Just don't disappear inside someone who can't meet you where you are, because one day someone will, and they'll give back everything you once gave away in silence. The hardest part about unrequited love isn't just that they don't feel the same, it's that they're close enough to keep the hope alive. They don't reject you outright, they don't shut the door, they just exist in your life. They text you, they lean on you, they laugh with you, and every small moment feels like maybe you're not imagining it. So you hold on. You tell yourself you're being patient. That timing is the issue, that one day they'll see what you feel so clearly, but deep down, you know you're waiting for something they never promised. And that's why it's so hard to leave, because unrequited love doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like unfinished business. You don't walk away angry, you walk away confused. You wonder if you should have said more, if you should have been quieter, if you waited too long, or tried too hard, and instead of letting go, you stay emotionally tethered, not because you're weak, but because your heart hasn't been given a clean ending, so it keeps hoping, keeps replaying moments, keeps searching for signs that maybe you still matter to them in that way, and that hope is what keeps the pain alive. You begin to wonder why you're always the one feeling more, why you're always the one waiting, why love seems so easy for others but feels just out of reach for you. You start shrinking your needs, telling yourself you don't want much anyway, convincing yourself that loving quietly is enough, but it's not, because caring without being chosen slowly teaches your heart that it should settle for less. You catch yourself doing things just to stay close, being extra understanding, always available, always forgiving. Not because you're weak, but because you're afraid that asking for more will push them away completely. So you accept crumbs and call it connection, and the longer this goes on, the more invisible you start to feel, not just to them, but to yourself. You forget what it feels like to be desired, to be someone's first choice, to be loved out loud, and that's the quiet danger of unrequited love. It doesn't just hurt you, it slowly teaches you to disappear. There's a reason unrequited love is so hard to walk away from. Not just love, it's anticipation. You live in the space of almost chosen, almost wanted, almost enough. Your brain starts clinging to small moments. A long conversation, a shared laugh, a look that might mean something, and those moments keep you hooked because when love isn't returned, your mind fills in the gaps with possibility. You imagine what could be instead of facing what is, and every time you think about letting go, you feel like you're giving up on a future that was never actually promised. So you stay hopeful, you stay available, you stay emotionally invested, not because it feels good, but because walking away feels like loss, even though nothing was ever yours. That's the trap. Unrequited love keeps you chasing closure from someone who doesn't know they're holding it, and the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to separate love from longing. You don't just miss them, you miss the version of yourself that believed it might work. At some point you feel it, the imbalance, you realize you're giving more than you're receiving, then emotionally, mentally, quietly. You're investing energy into someone who isn't investing back. You plan around them, you think about them, you hold space for them, and they just live their life. That's when it starts to hurt differently. Not sharp pain, but exhaustion. You're tired of wondering, tired of hoping, tired of pretending you're okay with crumbs. You notice how much of yourself is tied up in someone who doesn't even know how deeply you care. And for the first time, you ask yourself a hard question. If nothing changes, then how long can I keep doing this? Because loving someone in silence means you never get reassurance, never get clarity, never get chosen, and slowly, it teaches your heart that effort doesn't lead to safety. That love means waiting, that closeness means sacrifice, and that's not fair to you. Love isn't supposed to drain you. It isn't supposed to make you feel invisible. It isn't supposed to cost you your sense of worth, and realizing that is the beginning of letting go, even if your heart isn't ready yet. Letting go doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels wrong. It feels like you're giving up on someone you care about, like you're betraying something that meant a lot to you, even if it was never returned. You start questioning yourself. Am I being selfish? Am I overreacting? Did I just keep loving them quietly like before? Because walking away doesn't just mean losing them. It means losing the hope you've been holding on to. And hope is hard to release. You've built routines around them, emotions around them, a future that only existed in your head but still felt real. So choosing yourself feels like cruelty at first, like you're the one causing the pain, but staying was hurting you too. Just slower, just quieter. And that's the part people don't talk about. Sometimes self-respect feels like grief. Sometimes growth feels like loss. Sometimes choosing yourself feels worse than continuing to wait. But guilt doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you cared deeply. And caring deeply doesn't obligate you to keep hurting yourself in silence. After you finally choose yourself, something unexpected happens. It feels empty, not peaceful, not freeing, just quiet in a way that's uncomfortable. You're no longer waiting for their message, no longer replaying conversations, no longer building your day around the possibility of them. And at first, that absence hurts more than the waiting did, because unrequited love filled space. It gave your emotions somewhere to go. It gave your heart something to hold on to, even if it was hurting you. Though when it's gone, you don't immediately feel relief. You feel loss. You miss the closeness, you miss the routine, you even miss the hope, as painful as it was, and that makes you question your decision. You wonder if you left too early, if you should have tried harder, if loneliness is worse than longing. But this part matters, because this emptiness isn't failure, it's withdrawal. Your heart is unlearning a pattern, and unlearning always feels uncomfortable before it feels right. You didn't lose love, you made room for it, even if nothing has filled that space yet. One day after the emptiness settles, something shifts. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly. You start noticing how much lighter you feel without carrying love alone. You realize how much energy you used to spend hoping, waiting, adjusting, shrinking, all for someone who never met you where you stood. And for the first time, you don't miss them. You miss the idea of being chosen. That's an important difference, because now you know what it feels like to give deeply, and you also know what it costs when nothing comes back. So when love shows up again one day, it feels different. It doesn't make you question yourself. It doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't ask you to love in silence. It meets you halfway. You don't have to hide how much you care. You don't have to settle for almost. You don't have to convince yourself that crumbs are enough. And that's when you understand something fully. Unrequited love wasn't wasted. It taught you the depth of your heart. It proved you're capable of loving purely, selflessly, fully. But it was never meant to be your ending, because love isn't meant to be endured alone. It's meant to be shared. And one day someone will choose you as openly as you choose them. No silence, no guessing, no imbalance, just love. Lust will ruin your life if you don't learn how to recognize it for what it really is. Not temptation, not desire, not even attraction. Lust is a signal. It's like a check engine light flashing on your dashboard, warning you that something deeper is wrong under the surface. And most people don't want to hear that. They'd rather numb it, feed it, distract themselves with it, instead of asking why it showed up in the first place. Because here's the truth. When lust starts controlling your thoughts, your habits, your attention, it usually means you're lacking something real in your life. Not sex, not validation, intimacy. And intimacy doesn't always mean romance. That's where a lot of people get it twisted. Intimacy can be connection, it can be purpose, it can be faith, it can be feeling seen by people who actually care about you. It can be having someone you can talk to honestly without pretending you're okay. When those things are missing, lust steps in as a cheap replacement, gives you a temporary hit, a moment of feeling wanted, a moment of escape, but once that moment passes, you're left emptier than before. That's why lust never satisfies. It promises relief, but delivers restlessness. You indulge, and instead of feeling fulfilled, you feel more hollow, more disconnected, more frustrated with yourself, and then the cycle repeats. Because you're not fixing the problem, you're feeding the symptom. The craving itself isn't the enemy. The lack of awareness is. Lust shows up when you're avoiding something, when you're lonely, when you're stressed, when you're disconnected from yourself. It's your mind trying to fill a void without doing the work to understand why that void exists in the first place. And the more you indulge it without reflection, the more it delays your healing. You tell yourself it's harmless, that it's normal, that everyone does it. But deep down, you know when something isn't sitting right with your spirit. You know when it's no longer about desire and more about escape. This isn't about shame, it's about honesty. Lust is an indicator, a warning sign. A moment where you need to pause and ask yourself, what am I really craving right now? Connection? Comfort? Meaning? Peace? Because until you figure that out, lust will keep pulling you further away from yourself instead of closer to who you're meant to be. Most people don't want to admit this part, but lust usually shows up when you're feeling empty, not when you're fulfilled, when your life feels aligned, when you're grounded, when you have purpose and connection. Lust doesn't scream as loud. It might knock, but it doesn't take over. It only takes control when there's space inside you that hasn't been filled with anything meaningful. That's why lust hits hardest late at night, when you're alone, when the noise dies down, when there's nothing left to distract you from your thoughts. That's when your mind starts looking for something, anything, to feel good for a moment. And lust offers that shortcut. No effort, no vulnerability, no risk of rejection, just instant stimulation. But shortcuts always come with a cost. The more you use lust as an escape, the harder it becomes to sit with yourself. You start avoiding silence, avoiding stillness, avoiding the questions you don't want to answer. You tell yourself you're just satisfying a desire, but really you're training your brain to seek relief instead of growth, comfort instead of clarity. And over time, that changes you. It dulls your motivation. It weakens your discipline. It distorts how you view people, turning them into objects instead of humans. It lowers your tolerance for real connection because real intimacy requires patience, presence, and effort. Things lust never asks of you. This is why people who live in lust often feel stuck, not because they're bad or weak, but because they're constantly numbing the very discomfort that could push them to grow. Pain becomes something to escape instead of something to understand, and healing gets postponed again and again. You have to learn to pause when the urge hits, not to fight it with shame, but to question it. Ask yourself what you're actually missing in that moment. Is it connection, purpose, rest, direction? Because the urge is information, and if you listen to it instead of obeying it, it can lead you to what actually needs attention in your life. Lust loses power the moment you become aware of it. Here's where it gets uncomfortable but important. Lust isn't just about what you want. It's about what you're avoiding. Most people don't struggle with lust because they're overly sexual. They struggle because they're disconnected from themselves, from their purpose, from real relationships, from meaning. When you don't feel fulfilled in your day-to-day life, your mind looks for stimulation, something intense enough to make you forget how empty things feel. Lust is powerful because it hijacks your attention. It pulls you out of the present moment and into fantasy. And fantasy is easier than reality. Fantasy doesn't ask you to change. Reality does. That's why lust becomes a habit, not because it feels good, but because it distracts you from feeling bad. It numbs loneliness, it masks insecurity, it gives you a false sense of control when everything else in your life feels uncertain. But every time you choose that escape, you reinforce the idea that you can't handle discomfort without running from it. And that slowly chips away at you. You start feeling weaker mentally, less disciplined, less confident. You promise yourself you'll stop, then you don't. And now it's not just lust anymore, it's guilt, shame, self-disappointment. You start questioning your self-control, your character, your ability to change, all because you never addressed the root issue in the first place. The problem isn't desire. Desire is human. The problem is unchanneled desire. Desire without direction turns into self-destruction. When your energy isn't going into building something meaningful, it leaks into things that drain you instead. This is why people who overcome lust don't just resist harder, they replace it, they build structure, they strengthen their spirit, they deepen their relationships, they find something worth committing to that gives them purpose beyond momentary pleasure. Lust thrives in isolation, in boredom, in lack of direction. But when your life has meaning, when your days are intentional, when your spirit feels aligned, lust doesn't have much room to grow. It doesn't disappear overnight, but it stops controlling you. Another reason lust has so much power is because it disguises itself as confidence. It makes you feel wanted, desired, in control. For a brief moment, it tricks you into thinking you're fulfilled. But once that moment fades, you're left with the same questions, the same restlessness, the same hollow feeling you were trying to escape in the first place. That's how you know it's not real fulfillment. Real fulfillment doesn't vanish the second the stimulation stops. Real fulfillment gives you peace afterward, not regret. Clarity, not confusion. Strength, not self-disgust. And over time, if you're not careful, lust can start shaping how you view yourself. You begin to associate your worth with how desired you feel instead of who you actually are. You start needing validation just to feel okay. And when that validation isn't there, the craving comes back stronger, not because you're weak, but because your identity is being built on something unstable. This is where self-awareness becomes everything. You have to catch yourself and ask, what am I really avoiding right now? Am I running from loneliness, from boredom, from the work I know I need to do on myself? Lust often shows up when you're avoiding growth, when you're putting off healing, when you're ignoring parts of your life that need attention. The uncomfortable truth is that growth requires sitting with discomfort, requires stillness, silence, discipline, and lust offers you an easy way out of that process. But every time you take that exit, you delay becoming the version of yourself you know you're capable of being. You don't have to be perfect. You're going to slip. You're going to struggle. That's part of being human. What matters is whether you're conscious of the pattern or blindly repeating it. Awareness alone starts breaking the cycle. Because the goal isn't to eliminate desire. Desire is natural. The goal is to stop letting desire control you, to stop letting it dictate your habits, your focus, and your future. When you do that, you don't lose pleasure, you gain freedom. Here's where things start to shift if you're willing to be honest with yourself. Lust isn't just about what you want. It's about what you're avoiding becoming. Every time you give in without thinking, you're choosing comfort over growth. And that choice, repeated enough times, slowly shapes the direction of your life. You start delaying things you know you should be doing. Goals get pushed back, discipline weakens, motivation fades. Not all at once, but subtly. You tell yourself you'll lock in tomorrow, you'll change next week, you'll get serious later, but later keeps moving, and you stay stuck in the same patterns, wondering why nothing feels different. And the worst part? Lust makes you numb to it. It gives you just enough relief to tolerate a life you know you're not fully proud of. It lowers the urgency to change, because why face the discomfort of growth when you can distract yourself instead? This is why so many people feel lost, not because they lack potential, but because they keep trading long-term fulfillment for short-term relief. And relief is never the same as peace. Relief fades, peace stays. When you start addressing the real voids in your life, lust starts losing its grip naturally. When you build structure into your days, when you commit to something bigger than yourself, when you start respecting your time, your body, your mind, when you develop a relationship with God, purpose, or discipline, whatever grounds you, lust doesn't hit as hard, because now you have something to protect. You realize your energy is valuable, your attention is valuable, and not everything deserves access to you. You stop feeding impulses that don't align with the future you're trying to build, not out of fear, but out of respect for yourself. That's when lust stops feeling like a battle, it starts feeling like a signal. A reminder to check in with yourself, to ask, am I aligned right now? Or am I avoiding something I need to face? And every time you choose alignment over impulse, you get a little stronger, a little clearer, a little more in control. At this stage, you start realizing something important. Lust was never the root problem, it was the symptom. The real issue was disconnection. Disconnection from yourself, from purpose, from meaning, from the version of you that feels grounded and whole. Once you see that, the urge loses some of its mystery. It's no longer this uncontrollable force, it's just information. You begin to notice patterns. The urges come when you're tired, when you're bored, when you feel unaccomplished at the end of the day, when you avoided something you know you should have handled, and instead of judging yourself for it, you start listening. You ask, what am I missing right now? Rest, direction, fulfillment, human connection. This is where growth actually happens. When you suppress desire, but when you replace it. When you choose to build instead of escape. When you put energy into things that give back instead of drain you. Working on your body, your craft, your faith, your friendships. Things that leave you stronger afterward, not emptier. And the crazy part is, the more you do this, the quieter lust becomes. Not because it's gone, but because it's no longer needed to cope. You're not running from yourself anymore. You're becoming someone you respect. You start carrying yourself differently. Your confidence becomes real, not borrowed from temporary validation. You don't need constant stimulation to feel alive. You feel solid just being present, just being disciplined, just knowing you're moving in the right direction even when it's uncomfortable. That's when self-control stops feeling like restriction and starts feeling like freedom. Freedom from compulsions, freedom from regret, freedom from waking up feeling disappointed in yourself. You're no longer controlled by every urge that passes through your mind. You won't be perfect, nobody is, but you'll be conscious. And consciousness changes everything, because once you're aware, you get to choose, and choosing growth over impulse again and again is how you reclaim your life. There's a moment where you finally understand that discipline isn't about denying yourself pleasure. It's about choosing a better one, a deeper one. The kind that doesn't disappear the second the screen goes dark or the urge passes, the kind that stays with you when you're alone with your thoughts and you can actually respect the person staring back at you. You start realizing how much time and energy you were leaking, hours, focus, mental clarity, all going towards something that never loved you back, never built you up, never moved your life forward. And once you see that clearly, it's hard to unsee it. You begin protecting your mind the same way you'd protect your body. You stop feeding it things that weaken it. Now, this is where restraint becomes self-respect. You're no longer saying no because you're scared. You're saying no because you finally understand the cost of saying yes. You've felt the emptiness after. You've lived the fog. You've experienced how indulging too much slowly disconnects you from your ambition, your relationships, your purpose. And something else changes too. You start seeing people differently, not as objects, not as outlets, but as humans again, with depth, with emotion, with stories. Real connection stops feeling boring, it starts feeling rare, valuable, something worth protecting instead of rushing. That's when intimacy starts to return in healthier forms, real conversations, genuine friendships, moments of stillness that don't need to be filled, a sense of closeness with yourself that you didn't even realize you were missing. And once you taste that, lust loses its grip even more, because now you're building something, a life you don't need to escape from, a version of yourself you're proud of. When that happens, the urge doesn't disappear, but it no longer controls you. It passes like a thought, like a wave. At the end of the day, lust only has power when you don't understand it. When you finally see it for what it is, a signal, not a solution, it stops running your life. You stop treating it like something you must obey and start treating it like something you observe, and that shift changes everything. You realize you don't need to be perfect to be disciplined. You just need to be honest. Honest about what you're missing, honest about what you're avoiding, honest about who you want to become, because every urge is an invitation, not to indulge, but to check in. Once you start responding instead of reacting, you regain control. You stop letting momentary desire dictate long-term direction. You stop trading peace for pleasure. You stop delaying your growth for comfort, and slowly, your life begins to align with the values you claim to have. Lust didn't ruin you. It revealed the places where healing was needed, the moments where connection was missing, the areas of your life that needed structure, purpose, and depth. And once you start filling those spaces intentionally, lust no longer screams for attention. It fades into the background. You become more present, more focused, more grounded. You don't feel constantly pulled in 100 directions anymore. You know what matters, you know what doesn't, and you act accordingly. This isn't about becoming cold or denying desire. It's about mastering yourself, about building a life where your mind works for you, not against you, where your choices reflect your values, where you don't need escape because you're finally moving towards something real. And when you get there, you'll look back and realize something important. The urge was never the enemy. Ignoring the message was. I don't think I was ever her first choice. Not really. At the time I thought I was. She talked to me every day. She laughed at my jokes. She told me things she said she didn't tell anyone else. And when someone gives you that kind of attention, it's easy to believe you're the person they truly want. So I believed it. I believed that when she said she cared, she meant it. I believed that when she chose to spend time with me, it meant I mattered. I believed that whatever we were building was real. But looking back now, there were small signs I ignored, little moments where something didn't fully add up, times where she seemed unsure about us, times where her attention felt divided, times where it felt like she was still searching for something, even while she was with me. At the time, I brushed those moments off, because when you care about someone, you don't want to believe you're just an option. You want to believe you're the decision. So I stayed patient. I stayed loyal. I kept showing up the same way every day. But the truth is, when someone sees you as their first choice, you don't feel uncertain about it. You don't feel like you're competing with invisible possibilities. You don't feel like their attention could shift at any moment. Being someone's first choice feels stable. It feels clear. And what we had wasn't always clear. There were moments where it felt strong, but there were also moments where it felt like I was trying harder to keep the connection alive. Like I was the one holding the weight of something she wasn't fully sure about, and I didn't want to admit that to myself because nobody wants to believe there's someone's second option. But eventually the truth shows itself, not through words, through choices. And one day, her choices made something very clear. I wasn't the person she truly wanted. I was the person she stayed with until someone else felt like a better direction. And that realization hurts in a way that's hard to explain, because it doesn't just break your heart, it makes you question every moment that came before it. Once the idea entered my head that I might not have been her first choice, it was impossible to ignore, because suddenly memories started looking different. Moments that once felt normal started carrying a different meaning. I remembered the times she hesitated when talking about the future, the times she seemed distracted when we were together, the times where her energy felt slightly distant, even though she was right there in front of me. Back then, I didn't question it too much. When you care about someone, you naturally assume the best about them. You assume the connection is mutual. You assume the effort you're putting in is being matched emotionally. But sometimes the truth sits quietly in the background while we convince ourselves everything is fine. And that's what it felt like when I started replaying those memories. Like the signs were always there, but I didn't want to see them. because nobody wants to believe they're the backup plan. Nobody wants to believe they're the person someone stays with while they're still figuring out what they really want. But when someone truly sees you as their first choice, things feel different. There's clarity, there's certainty. You don't constantly feel like you have to prove why you deserve to be there. You don't feel like their attention might shift if the right opportunity appears. But with her, there were moments where I felt that uncertainty, and I kept pushing it away because admitting it would have meant admitting something painful, that maybe she cared about me, but not in the way I cared about her. And that's a difficult thing to face, because it means the connection wasn't equal. One person was fully invested, the other person was still deciding. And when one person is deciding while the other person is committed, the balance is already off. You're building something with someone who hasn't fully chosen you yet, and eventually that imbalance reveals itself, not through arguments, not through dramatic moments, through decisions. And decisions don't lie. One day, her decision made something very clear to me. I wasn't the person she was always sure about. I was the person she stayed with, while she kept wondering if someone else might be a better choice. When you start realizing you were never someone's first choice, the hardest part isn't the breakup. It's the realization that you were trying to win a place in someone's life that was never fully yours. Because when someone truly chooses you, you don't feel like you're competing with invisible options. You don't feel like their attention could disappear the moment something new shows up. You don't feel like you constantly have to prove why you deserve to be there. But with her, that feeling existed sometimes, not all the time, just enough to quietly sit in the back of my mind. There were moments where everything felt perfect. We talked for hours, we'd laugh like nothing else in the world mattered. And during those moments, I believed completely that I was the person she wanted. But then there were other moments where she seemed unsure, moments where her energy changed, moments where I felt like I was the one holding the connection together. And the strange thing about being someone's second option is this: they can still care about you, they can still enjoy your company, they can still appreciate what you bring into their life, but deep down, there's a part of them that hasn't fully committed, a part of them that's still wondering, still looking, still asking themselves if there's something else out there that fits them better. And that's a painful place to stand in someone's life, because while you're building something real, they're still evaluating it. You're investing, they're deciding, you're certain, they're uncertain, and when one person is certain while the other person is unsure, the outcome is almost always the same. Eventually, the person who was unsure finds a direction that feels clearer to them. And when that happens, the person who was giving everything suddenly realizes something heartbreaking. They were never the final decision. They were the temporary one. The moment I finally accepted that I was never her first choice, everything started making more sense. For the longest time, I thought the problem was something I did wrong. Maybe I didn't say the right things. Maybe I didn't keep things exciting enough. Maybe I should have noticed the distance sooner. Your mind does that when someone walks away. It starts searching for mistakes you could fix. Because if there's a mistake, then maybe there was a way to save it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't losing because I failed. I was losing because she was never fully choosing me to begin with. There's a big difference between someone being with you and someone being certain about you. At the time, I thought those were the same thing, but they're not. Someone can spend time with you, someone can laugh with you, someone can even care about you, and still not see you as the person they're fully committed to. And when someone isn't fully committed, their heart stays open to other possibilities. That's where the uncertainty comes from. That's why the energy sometimes feels inconsistent. That's why you occasionally feel like you're trying harder than they are, because deep down, one person is already sure, and the the other person is still deciding. And when someone is still deciding, the moment another option appears, everything shifts, not because you suddenly became less valuable, but because they were never finished searching. Looking back, that's what hurts the most. Not that she left, but that I gave my loyalty to someone who was still questioning if I was the person they really wanted, because loyalty only feels safe when it's mutual, when both people are standing in the same place emotionally, when both people have already decided this is the person I'm choosing. But that's not what we had. I had already chosen her. She was still deciding if she should choose me, and eventually she didn't. After that realization hit me that I was never really her first choice, something inside me shifted. At first it felt humiliating, because nobody wants to admit they were standing in someone's life as a possibility instead of a priority. You start thinking about all the effort you gave, all the time you invested, all the patience you showed, all the loyalty you carried for someone who wasn't standing on the same level of certainty. And the painful part is this: while I was building something solid in my mind, she was still deciding whether she wanted to stay. That imbalance is invisible when you're inside the relationship, because when you love someone, you assume the feeling is mutual. You assume they're just as sure as you are. But certainty has a different energy. When someone is sure about you, there's no hesitation, no distance, no quiet sense that you're being evaluated. They don't keep looking around. They don't keep wondering if something better might appear. They simply choose you, and they keep choosing you. Looking back now, I can see the difference where, with her, there were moments where everything felt strong, but there were also moments where it felt like she was slightly pulling away. Moments where the connection felt uneven. Moments where it felt like I was trying to hold something steady while she was still questioning it. At the time, I thought those moments were temporary. I thought if I stayed patient, if I kept showing up the same way, eventually she would feel as certain as I did. But certainty doesn't grow out of pressure, it grows out of genuine alignment. And if someone doesn't feel that alignment, no amount of loyalty can force it. That's the truth I had to accept. She didn't leave because I failed. She left because she was never completely convinced that I was the person she wanted to build her future with. And that realization hurts in a very specific way, because it makes you feel like you were standing in someone's life waiting to be chosen, while they were quietly considering someone else. The hardest part about realizing you were never someone's first choice isn't just the heartbreak, it's the way it makes you question your own judgment. Because when you look back, you start wondering how you didn't see it sooner, how you didn't notice the hesitation, how you didn't recognize the moments where her energy didn't fully match yours. But the truth is, when you care about someone, you don't analyze them like a stranger. You trust them, you take their words seriously, you assume the connection means the same thing to them as it does to you. So when she said she cared, I believed her. When she spent time with me, I thought it meant I was important to her. When we talked about things that felt personal, I thought that meant we were building something real. And maybe in her own way she did care. But caring about someone and being certain about them are two completely different things. Someone can care about you and still not see you as their future. Someone can enjoy being with you while still wondering if someone else might feel more right. And when someone is still wondering, you end up standing in a very fragile place in their life, because the moment something new appears, something that feels more exciting, more aligned, or simply different, their uncertainty starts leaning in a new direction. And that's what eventually happened. She didn't suddenly stop liking me. She just found someone she felt more sure about. And the moment that happened, everything changed. The attention shifted, the conversations faded, the connection that once felt strong suddenly felt like it was slipping through my hands. And in that moment, I finally understood something I had been avoiding. I wasn't losing my place in her life. I was losing the position I never truly had. I wasn't the person she had fully chosen. I was the person she stayed with while she was still deciding. Once I accepted that I was never her first choice, another realization started settling in. I wasn't just hurt because she left. I was hurt because of what it revealed about the entire relationship. Because when you think someone chose you, you build your whole mindset around that belief. You become loyal, you become patient, you invest your time and your emotions because you believe the other person is standing in the same place as you. But when you realize they weren't, it changes how you see everything that happened before. I started noticing the imbalance more clearly. The moments where I adjusted my schedule to make time for her. The moments where I tried to fix problems because I thought the relationship mattered equally to both of us. The moments where I stayed calm and patient during times she felt distant. I thought I was protecting something meaningful, but now I understand something I didn't see then. I was protecting a relationship that she was still questioning, and when one person is protecting something while the other person is still deciding if they even want it, the outcome is almost inevitable, because eventually the person who's unsure finds something that feels more certain. And when that happens, the person who was investing everything suddenly realizes something painful. They were standing in someone's life waiting to be chosen by someone who had never fully chosen them in the first place. That's a difficult truth to accept, because it forces you to admit that the relationship meant more to you than it did to them. It forces you to admit that while you were building something in your mind, they were still exploring their options, and that realization hits your pride in a way that's hard to describe, not because you hate the other person, but because it makes you question your own judgment. It makes you wonder how you didn't see the difference between being valued and being temporarily convenient. But over time, I started understanding something important. Being someone's first choice isn't something you should have to fight to become. It isn't something you should have to prove you deserve. When someone truly sees you as their first choice, it feels clear, it feels stable. You don't spend your time wondering if someone else might replace you, because they've already decided where they stand. And with her, that decision was never fully made, not in the way I thought it was. After enough time passed, the pain of realizing I was never her first choice slowly started turning into something else. Clarity, because once the emotions settle down, you begin seeing the relationship without the illusion you had while you were inside it. When I was with her, I kept thinking that if I just stayed loyal enough, patient enough, supportive enough, eventually she would see that I was the right person. I thought certainty was something that would grow over time. But real certainty doesn't need to be convinced, it doesn't need to be proven. When someone truly sees you as their first choice, they don't hesitate. They don't keep looking around. They don't treat you like a possibility they're still evaluating. They choose you, and that choice feels obvious. Looking back, I realized I spent a lot of time trying to earn a position that should have been natural. Trying harder, showing more patience, giving more understanding whenever things felt off. And at the time, I thought that effort meant I was being strong, but now I understand something I didn't see before. You shouldn't have to fight to become someone's first choice. If someone truly values you, you won't feel like you're constantly proving your worth. You won't feel like your place in their life is temporary. You won't feel like their attention could shift the moment something new appears with the right person. That kind of uncertainty doesn't exist, and realizing that changed the way I looked at the whole situation, because for a long time I thought losing her meant I lost something important, but the truth is I lost a position that was never fully secure to begin with. I was trying to build a future with someone who had never fully decided that I was the person they wanted to build it with. And once you see that clearly, the pain starts losing its power, because you realize something important. You didn't lose someone who was fully committed to you. You lost someone who was still searching. Once I finally accepted that I was never her first choice, something unexpected happened. The story in my head started changing. For a long time, I looked at the situation like I had lost something valuable, like someone had taken my place, like I had somehow been replaced by someone better. But when you step back from the emotion and really look at the situation, you start realizing something different. I wasn't replaced, I was simply standing in a place that was never fully mine. Because when someone truly sees you as their first choice, there isn't a long period of hesitation. There isn't a constant feeling that something might change. There isn't a quiet sense that they're still evaluating their options. When someone knows they want you, the energy feels different. It feels stable, it feels certain. You don't spend your time wondering where you stand. You already know. And the truth is, with her, I never fully had that certainty. There were moments where it felt strong, moments where the connection felt real, but there were also moments where something felt slightly off, moments where I felt like I was trying harder to hold things together, moments where it felt like she was still deciding how much of herself she wanted to give. At the time, I ignored those feelings, because when you love someone, you want to believe the connection is mutual, you want to believe the effort is balanced, but effort and certainty are two different things. Someone can enjoy what you give them while still being unsure if you're the person they truly want. And when someone is unsure, their heart is still open to other possibilities. That's what eventually happened. She didn't suddenly stop caring about me. She simply found someone she felt more certain about. And once that certainty appeared, my place in her life disappeared. At first, that realization felt humiliating, but over time it started feeling like clarity, because it reminded me of something important. You shouldn't have to fight to become someone's first choice. If someone truly values you, that position is obvious. Looking back now, the hardest part about realizing I was never her first choice wasn't the breakup, it was the lesson. Because it forced me to understand something about relationships that I didn't fully grasp before. Love isn't just about how much you care about someone. It's about whether that care is equally returned. You can be loyal, you can be patient, you can give someone your time, your attention, and your effort. But if the other person hasn't fully chosen you, none of that guarantees they'll stay. And that's a painful truth to learn, but it's also an important one because it changes the way you look at relationships moving forward. It teaches you that being someone's first choice isn't something you should have to earn through constant effort. It should be something they feel naturally, something they decide clearly, something they show through their actions. Because when someone truly chooses you, you won't feel like you're competing with invisible possibilities. You won't feel like their attention could disappear at any moment. You won't feel like you're just temporarily filling a space in their life. You'll feel secure, you'll feel valued, you'll feel chosen, and that's the kind of connection everyone deserves. For a long time, I thought realizing I was never her first choice meant I had lost something important, but now I see it differently. What I actually lost was a situation where I was giving my loyalty to someone who had never fully decided they wanted it, and losing that isn't a failure, it's a redirection. Because one day I'll meet someone who doesn't hesitate, someone who doesn't keep looking for alternatives, someone who doesn't treat my presence like something temporary, someone who chooses me without needing time to decide. And when that happens, the difference will be obvious. Because for the first time, I won't feel like I'm trying to become someone's first choice. I'll simply know that I already am. I owe you an apology. Not the kind that fixes things. Not the kind that makes the pain disappear. Just the honest kind. I couldn't meet you where you stood. I didn't show up the way you deserved. I didn't give you my time, my focus, or the version of me you believed in. And I hate that because you didn't ask for much. You just wanted consistency. You just wanted effort. You just wanted me to stay. And the truth is, I didn't walk away because I didn't care. I walked away because I cared and still felt lost. For a moment, you broke through everything I built to protect myself. The walls were down. I was open open again. I remembered how to feel without fear, how to love without keeping score. I was that version of myself I thought was gone. Then reality got loud. Responsibilities piled up. Pressure from the future kept whispering that love wasn't something I had room for right now, that I needed to focus, that I needed to choose progress over emotion. Those thoughts didn't show up once, they stayed. They wore me down. I didn't know how to balance becoming who I needed to be and being who you needed at the same time, so instead of learning how, I ran. And I know saying sorry doesn't undo that. I know explanations don't heal wounds. I know intention doesn't erase impact. I hate that I taught you what love feels like when it leaves. I hate that I entered your life knowing I wasn't ready to stay. You didn't deserve confusion. You didn't deserve half effort. You didn't deserve to be left wondering if you were enough. You were. I just wasn't. And maybe one day when timing isn't fighting us, when growth doesn't feel like a threat to connection, I'll look back and understand why it had to end like this. But for now, all I can give you is honesty, not excuses, not promises, just this truth. I didn't fail to love because you weren't right. I failed because I wasn't ready. What hurts the most is knowing I saw the damage happening in real time and still didn't know how to stop it. I felt myself pulling away while you were still reaching out. I noticed the distance growing before I ever said a word about it, and instead of communicating the fear, the confusion, the pressure I was under, I stayed quiet. I chose silence because it was easier than admitting I didn't have the capacity to love you the way you needed. I convinced myself I was protecting you by leaving, that if I walked away early it would hurt less. But that was just another lie I told myself to make it easier to go. Because walking away doesn't soften the impact, it just changes the shape of the pain. Instead of closure, it leaves questions. Instead of understanding, it leaves self-doubt. And I hate that I played a part in that for you. You probably wondered what changed. You said something wrong. If you asked for too much, if loving me was a mistake, that's the part that keeps me up at night, because none of this was your fault. You didn't push me away, you didn't move too fast, you didn't love wrong. You loved honestly, and I wasn't prepared to receive that. I wish I could tell you that timing is just an excuse, that if you really love someone, you make it work no matter what, but the truth is messier than that. Sometimes people are still becoming who they need to be. Sometimes they're carrying pressure they don't know how to put down, and sometimes they mistake love for something they need to run from instead of lean into. I didn't leave because you weren't enough. I left because I felt like I was failing at everything at once, and instead of asking for patience, I chose distance. I know apologies don't fix what's broken. I know understanding doesn't erase the hurt, but if there's one thing I hope you never forget, it's this. You didn't lose me because you loved too much. I lost you because I didn't know how to stay. There's a weight that comes with being the one who leaves. People think the person who walks away always has it easier. That's not true. Walking away doesn't mean you stop feeling. It just means you carry the guilt quietly. You replay moments where you should have stayed, moments where you should have fought harder, moments where you almost turned around but didn't. I still think about the way you looked at me when you trusted me, the way you believed in something I wasn't brave enough to hold on to. That kind of trust stays with you. It doesn't disappear just because the relationship ended. It becomes a reminder of what you weren't ready to protect. I know from the outside it probably looks like I chose myself, like I chose my future over you, but it never felt like a clean choice. It felt like failing two things at once, losing you and losing the version of myself that finally felt understood. I didn't walk away empowered, I walked away conflicted. Some nights I wonder what would have happened if I stayed, if I tried harder to balance everything instead of running from it, if I learned how to grow with you instead of convincing myself I had to grow alone. But wondering doesn't change reality. It just reminds me that timing can ruin something real if you let fear lead the decision. I hope you never think I took your love lightly. I felt it, I just didn't know how to carry it without dropping everything else in my life. And instead of learning how, I chose the easier pain, the pain of absence instead of the pain of effort. If you ever question your worth because of how I left, please don't. The fact that I felt safe enough to open up, even briefly, says everything about you. The fact that I couldn't stay says everything about where I was, not who you are. There's something I never said out loud, and maybe I should have. Leaving didn't make things quieter in my head. It made them louder, because once you're gone, there's no distraction from the truth, no comfort of your presence, no reassurance to lean on when doubt creeps in, just you, alone, facing the consequences of the choice you made. I had to sit with the fact that I hurt someone who only wanted to love me right, that I walked away from something genuine because I was scared of not being enough in the future I was chasing. And fear has a way of disguising itself as logic. It tells you you're being responsible, when really you're just running. I told myself I'd come back when things settled down, when life felt more manageable, when I had my priorities straight. But life doesn't pause to give you a second chance at people. And by the time you realize what you lost, the door is usually already closed. What I regret most isn't just leaving. It's not explaining myself fully while I was still there. I didn't give you the clarity you deserved. I let you fill in the blanks on your own, and that's unfair. Silence leaves room for self-blame, and you never deserve to carry that. You probably questioned if the love was real, if the moments meant anything. They did, every single one. The meaning alone isn't always enough to keep two people together when one of them doesn't know how to stay grounded. I'm learning now that growth doesn't have to come at the cost of connection, that ambition and love aren't enemies, that sometimes the bravest thing isn't walking away, but learning how to hold two things at once. I just wish I learned that lesson sooner. The hardest part to accept is that some lessons only make sense after the damage is done. I didn't understand back then that love isn't something you pause and come back to later. When life is more convenient, love happens in the middle of the chaos and the uncertainty and the balancing act you're scared you'll fail at. And I failed because I thought I had to choose one path or the other. I thought I had to become someone first before I could love you properly. I didn't realize that loving you could have been part of becoming that person. Instead, I treated love like a distraction instead of support, like something I had to set aside instead of something that could have helped carry the weight. Now I see how unfair that was to you. You were willing to grow alongside me. You weren't asking for perfection. You were asking for presence, for effort, for honesty, and instead of trusting that, I doubted myself so much that I made the choice for both of us. There's a strange loneliness that comes with choosing growth the wrong way. You make progress, but it feels hollow. You reach milestones and realize there's no one to share them with. And that's when it hits you that success without connection can still feel empty. I don't regret wanting more out of life. I regret not knowing how to include you in that vision. I regret thinking I had to do everything alone, because strength isn't isolation. Strength is knowing when to lean on someone who's willing to stand with you. If I could say one thing without apologizing again, it would be this: don't let my fear make you afraid to love again. Don't let my timing convince you that you asked for too much. You didn't. I just wasn't ready to rise to the moment. There's a quiet regret that doesn't show up right away. It creeps in later when life slows down and you finally have time to reflect. When the noise fades and you're left alone with the truth, that regret isn't loud or dramatic, it's subtle. The realization that you let go of something real because you were afraid of not being able to handle it. I used to think walking away meant I was choosing myself. Now I understand that choosing yourself doesn't always mean leaving. Sometimes it means staying and learning how to show up better, and I didn't know how to do that back then. I thought distance would give me clarity. All it really gave me was perspective. I wish I had sooner. I see now how rare it is to find someone willing to love you while you're still figuring yourself out. Someone patient enough to stand beside you without demanding you have everything together. And I walked away from that because I didn't believe I could be both growing and loving at the same time. There are moments I want to reach out, to explain everything I didn't know how to say before, but I don't, because reopening wounds for my own peace wouldn't be fair to you. Some apologies are meant to stay unspoken, carried quietly as lessons instead of words. I hope you found someone who meets you with the same energy you gave, someone who doesn't hesitate, someone who chooses you without second guessing. And if you haven't yet, I hope you at least learned that the love you offer is rare. The way you care isn't something everyone can handle, but the right person will treasure it. As for me, I'm learning that readiness isn't something you wait for. It's something you practice, and I'm practicing now, even if it's too late for us. There's a strange kind of maturity that comes from realizing you can't undo certain things, not because you don't care enough, but because caring now would mean accepting that some doors close quietly and stay that way. And learning to respect that is part of growing up, even when it hurts. I've had to sit with the fact that love doesn't always come back around when you're finally ready. Sometimes it shows up before you know how to hold it, teaches you a lesson, and leaves. Not as punishment, but as preparation. And that's a hard truth to swallow when you realize the timing was off by just a little, but that little bit changed everything. What stays with me isn't just the regret, it's the clarity, the understanding of what I want to be different next time. I know now that I don't want to run when things get heavy. I don't want to choose distance just because I'm scared of failing. I don't want to confuse being busy with being unavailable. I don't want to leave someone guessing where they stand. You taught me that love isn't about having everything figured out. It's about choosing someone even when life is uncertain, about growing with someone instead of away from them. And even though I couldn't do that with you, that lesson is etched into me now. I hope you never look back and think you weren't enough. You were more than enough. You were just early, and sometimes early still hurts like loss. There are people we don't end up with who still change the trajectory of our lives. You were one of those people for me, and even if our story didn't continue, it mattered. It always will. This is where I finally stop apologizing and start accepting. Accepting that some connections aren't meant to be fixed, revisited, or explained away. They're meant to be learned from and released. Holding on to guilt doesn't change the past, and holding on to hope doesn't rewrite the ending. All it does is keep you stuck in a moment that already passed. I didn't lose you because love wasn't real. I lost you because timing, fear, and growth didn't align. And as painful as that is to admit, it's also freeing, because it allows me to move forward without pretending I was the victim or the villain. I was just someone who didn't know how to stay yet. You don't owe me forgiveness, you don't owe me understanding, and I don't expect you to remember me kindly. All I hope is that you remember the love for what it was. Honest, real, human, even if it couldn't last. I carry this with me now. Not as regret that weighs me down, but as awareness that shapes who I become. I know how fragile connection is. I know how rare it is to find someone who sees you fully and still stays. And next time, I won't confuse love with something I need to run from. Some people are meant to be chapters, not the whole book. And even though this chapter ended before I was ready, it taught me how to write the next one with more care, wherever you are. I hope you're loved the way you tried to love me. And for the first time, I'm not saying sorry, I'm saying thank you. I don't know who needs to hear this, but you have to let them go. Not slowly, not halfway, not with one foot still stuck in the past. You have to actually let them go, because they're not coming back. Not in the way you want, not in the way you deserve. And holding on to that hope is what's keeping you stuck. That's the hardest part to accept. Not the loss itself, but the finality of it. The idea that the version of them you're waiting for doesn't exist anymore. Or maybe it never did. You keep replaying memories, rereading old messages, telling yourself that if you just wait a little longer, they'll realize what they lost. That they'll come back changed, more sure, more ready. But the truth is, if they wanted to come back, they would have already. Letting go feels like betrayal. Like you're giving up on something that once meant everything to you. It feels wrong to stop caring when you cared so deeply for so long. Your mind keeps fighting it, saying just one more day, just one more chance, just one more sign. But every extra day you hold on is another day you delay your own healing. You don't let go because you stop loving them. You let go because loving them is costing you yourself, your peace, your sleep, your confidence, your ability to be present. You've been living in a constant state of waiting for a text, waiting for clarity, waiting for closure that isn't coming, and that waiting has slowly been draining you. Here's what nobody tells you. Closure doesn't always come from a conversation. Sometimes closure is realizing that silence is the answer, that their absence is the explanation, that the confusion you feel is the clarity you've been avoiding. Because someone who truly wants to be in your life won't make you question where you stand. You keep thinking that letting go means nothing good will ever replace what you lost, that you missed your chance, that this was the one. That's grief talking, not truth. Grief narrows your vision, makes the past feel bigger than the future. It convinces you that the best days are behind you, when in reality they haven't even happened yet. Letting go doesn't happen all at once. It's a series of small, painful choices. Choosing not to check their profile, choosing not to reread old messages, choosing not to fantasize about a version of them that no longer exists, choosing yourself, even when it hurts. And yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow, one of the hardest. But the sooner you swallow it, the sooner you can breathe again. The sooner your life starts moving forward instead of replaying the same chapter over and over. Good things are going to come again. I promise you that. But they can't find you if you're still emotionally living somewhere you no longer belong. Right now, it probably feels impossible to believe that anything good could come after this. When you lose someone you were attached to, your world shrinks. Your future starts looking empty, quiet, unfamiliar. You measure everything against them. Every laugh feels weaker. Every conversation feels forced. Every good moment feels incomplete because they're not there to share it with. That's normal. Your brain is grieving what could have been, not just what was. You're mourning the plans you never got to live out, the version of the future you built in your head, the comfort of having someone to lean on. And when that disappears, your mind panics. It tells you this was it. This was your chance. You won't feel like this again. But that voice isn't truth. It's fear. Fear tries to convince you that staying attached is safer than starting over, that even pain you recognize is better than uncertainty. So you cling to what's familiar even when it hurts you, even when it drains you, even when it keeps you stuck in the same emotional place you've been in for too long. Letting go feels like stepping into darkness. You don't know what's on the other side yet. You don't know who you'll become without them. You don't know how long it'll take to feel okay again, and that uncertainty is terrifying. But staying where you are guarantees one thing: nothing changes. You don't heal by holding on tighter. You heal by loosening your grip, even when every part of you wants to resist. You heal by accepting that some people are meant to be chapters, not whole stories, that some connections exist to teach you something, not to stay forever. And yeah, it hurts to admit that someone you love doesn't have a place in your life anymore. It hurts to realize that effort wasn't enough, that love alone couldn't fix timing, readiness, or their inability to choose you fully. But pain doesn't mean failure. Pain means you cared. Pain means you were real. You're not weak for struggling to let go. You're human. But don't confuse holding on with loyalty. Don't confuse waiting with strength. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from something you still want because you know it's no longer good for you. You're not erasing them by letting go. You're releasing yourself. One of the most painful realizations you'll have is that letting go isn't about them at all. It's about you. It's about finally admitting that you've been living for something that no longer exists, that you've been holding space in your heart for someone who stopped holding space for you a long time ago. You tell yourself you're just being patient, that you're strong for waiting, that real love doesn't give up, but there's a difference between patience and self-abandonment. There's a difference between fighting for something and fighting yourself every single day just to survive it, and deep down, you know which one this has become. You've been stuck in this cycle of hope and disappointment. One day you feel okay, almost proud of how far you've come. The next day, a memory hits you out of nowhere and you're right back at the beginning. A song, a place, a random thought at 2 a.m., and suddenly your chest feels heavy again. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you haven't fully let go yet, because part of you is still waiting for them to validate what you felt, to admit they hurt you, to say they cared as much as you did. But here's the truth you don't want to accept yet. You may never get that. And waiting for it is only keeping you tied to someone who already moved on. Letting go means accepting unanswered questions. It means choosing peace over understanding. It means realizing that not everything broken needs to be fixed. Some things just need to be released, and that's uncomfortable because your heart wants certainty, wants meaning, it wants closure wrapped in a conversation that makes everything make sense. But sometimes closure is recognizing that someone's inability to choose you is the answer, that their silence, their distance, their inconsistency already told you everything you needed to know. You just weren't ready to hear it yet. You didn't imagine the connection. You didn't make it all up. What you felt was real. But real feelings don't guarantee a real future, and holding on to that distinction is one of the hardest lessons you'll ever learn. You're not behind for struggling with this. You're not weak for missing them, but you are allowed to stop suffering for someone who isn't suffering without you. There comes a moment where you have to be honest with yourself about what you're really holding on to. Is it them, or is it the version of them you created in your head? The version that would have changed, the version that would have stayed, the version that would have finally chosen you the way you needed, because most of the time, that's what keeps you stuck. Not reality, but imagination. You fell in love with potential, with what could have been. If things were different, if timing was better, if they were more emotionally available, if they wanted the same future you did. But you can't build a life on ifs, and you can't heal while you're still negotiating with the past. Your heart keeps saying just a little longer. Your mind keeps saying maybe one more chance. But your body is exhausted, tired of carrying the weight, tired of the anxiety, tired of waking up every day with the same ache in your chest. That's your sign. Not everything that hurts is meant to be held on to. Letting go doesn't mean you pretend it didn't matter. It mattered deeply. That's why it hurts. But there's a difference between honoring what you felt and imprisoning yourself in it. You're allowed to acknowledge the love without chaining yourself to the loss. And here's something important. Moving on doesn't mean you'll forget them. You won't. Certain people leave marks on us, but those marks don't have to control where we go next. They can be reminders instead of wounds, lessons instead of anchors. Right now you're still looking backward, trying to make sense of something that already ended, but life doesn't unfold in reverse. There are people you haven't met yet, versions of yourself you haven't grown into yet, moments that will make this pain feel smaller in comparison. You just can't see them because you're still standing in the doorway of what was. Letting go is choosing to step forward even when your legs are shaking, even when you're scared of what's next, even when you don't feel ready, because staying where you are is hurting you more than leaving ever could. One of the hardest things you'll face once you start letting go is the emptiness it leaves behind. Not just emotional emptiness, but routine emptiness. They used to be part of your day, someone you talked to when something good happened, someone you leaned on when things went wrong. And now there's this silence where their presence used to be. That silence can feel unbearable at first. Your instinct will be to fill it with distractions, with new people, with anything that keeps you from sitting with the loss. And while distractions can help temporarily, they won't heal you if you use them to avoid feeling. Because healing requires you to feel it fully, to sit in the discomfort, to accept that this chapter ended and that it's okay to grieve it. You might catch yourself wanting to reach out, not because you have something to say, but because you miss the familiarity, the comfort, the version of yourself that existed when they were around. But understand this, missing someone doesn't mean they're meant to be in your life again. It just means they were once important. There's a difference between love and attachment. Love wants what's best for both people. Attachment wants relief from pain. And most of the time when you want to go back, it's attachment talking, not love. It's the part of you that's scared of being alone, not the part that's thinking clearly. This is where growth actually happens. In the moments where you choose not to reach out, where you choose to sit with the ache instead of numbing it. You choose yourself even when it feels lonely. Every time you make that choice, you're rebuilding trust with yourself. You're proving that you can survive without them. And slowly, that silence won't feel so loud anymore. It'll start to feel like space. Space to think, space to breathe, space to rediscover who you are without them. And in that space, something new begins to form. Not another person, but a stronger version of you. One of the hardest things you'll face once you start letting go is the emptiness it leaves behind. Not just emotional emptiness, but routine emptiness. It used to be part of your day. Someone you talked to when something good happened, someone you leaned on when things went wrong. And now there's this silence where their presence used to be. That silence can feel unbearable at first. Your instinct will be to fill it with distractions, with new people, with anything that keeps you from sitting with the loss. And while distractions can help temporarily, they won't heal you if you use them to avoid feeling, because healing requires you to feel it fully, to sit in the discomfort, to accept that this chapter ended and that it's okay to grieve it. You might catch yourself wanting to reach out, not because you have something to say, but because you miss the familiarity, the comfort, the version of yourself that existed when they were around. But understand this. Missing someone doesn't mean they're meant to be in your life again. It just means they were once important. There's a difference between love and attachment. Love wants what's best for both people. Attachment wants relief from pain, and most of the time when you want to go back, it's attachment talking, not love. It's the part of you that's scared of being alone, not the part that's thinking clearly. This is where growth actually happens. And the moments where you choose not to reach out, where you choose to sit with the ache instead of numbing it, where you choose yourself even when it feels lonely, every time you make that choice, you're rebuilding trust with yourself. You're proving that you can survive without them. And slowly that silence won't feel so loud anymore. It will start to feel like space, space to think, space to breathe, space to rediscover who you are without them. And in that space, something new begins to form, not another person, but a stronger version of you. Eventually you start noticing small shifts, not dramatic ones, nothing that feels like a movie moment, just quiet changes. You wake up and they aren't the first thought in your head anymore. You go a few hours without checking your phone. You laugh at something and realize it didn't immediately remind you of them. And for a second you feel guilty for that. Like moving forward means erasing what you had. It doesn't. Healing isn't linear. Some days you'll feel strong, other days a random memory will knock the wind out of you. It doesn't mean you're going backwards, it means you're human. You spend time building something emotionally, tearing it down takes time too. Be patient with yourself in that process. This is also when clarity starts setting in. You begin to see things more honestly, the red flags you ignored, the effort imbalance, the moments where you shrunk yourself just to keep them around. You realize how often you settled for breadcrumbs and called it love because you didn't want to accept the truth. And instead of hurting you, that realization empowers you. Because now you know what you don't want. You know what you won't tolerate again. You know that love shouldn't feel like confusion, anxiety, or constant self-doubt. It shouldn't make you question your worth. It shouldn't require you to beg for effort or clarity. You also start forgiving yourself for staying too long, for hoping too hard, for ignoring your intuition. You did the best you could with what you knew at the time. That version of you was just trying to be loved. There's nothing shameful about that. And slowly you stop romanticizing the past. You stop replaying only the good parts. You start remembering the nights you felt lonely even when they were still around, times you felt anxious instead of secure, the moments you felt like you were asking for too much when you were really just asking the wrong person. That's when letting go stops feeling like loss. It starts feeling like relief. At some point, you stop asking yourself why it didn't work. That question loses its power, not because you found every answer, but because you finally realize the answers wouldn't change the outcome. Understanding doesn't always heal you. Acceptance does. You accept that you loved genuinely, even if it wasn't returned the same way. You accept that you showed up fully, even if they didn't know how to meet you there. You accept that some people come into your life to teach you something, not to stay forever. And that lesson, as painful as it was, shaped you into someone wiser. You start trusting yourself again, trusting your judgment, trusting your ability to walk away when something doesn't feel right, trusting that if something ends, you will survive it. That trust is powerful. It changes how you approach everything else in your life. You become more intentional with your time, with your energy, with who you allow access to you. You no longer chase people who are unsure about you. You no longer explain your worth to anyone. You no longer wait around hoping someone will choose you, because you already chose yourself, and that choice shifts everything. You realize you don't need someone to complete you. You're already whole. You wanted them, yes, but you don't need them to be okay. That realization doesn't make you cold. It makes you free. Free from the constant anxiety, free from the emotional limbo, free from the cycle of waiting. You still believe in love, you still want connection, but now you want it without losing yourself, without shrinking, without begging, without settling. You want something that adds to your life, not something you have to recover from, and that's how you know you're healing. Not when the pain disappears completely, but when it no longer controls your decisions. I don't know who needs to hear this right now, but you have to let them go. Not because you didn't care enough, not because what you felt wasn't real, but because holding on to something that's already gone is only hurting you more. They're not coming back, and I know that's a hard pill to swallow. It's one of those truths that sits heavy in your chest because part of you is still hoping, still replaying memories, still thinking maybe one day things will go back to how they were. But the truth is, if they wanted to come back, they would have. You wouldn't be sitting here questioning everything. You wouldn't be overanalyzing every small sign. You wouldn't be waiting for a text that never comes. Someone who wants to be in your life makes that clear. They don't leave you guessing, they don't disappear, and expect you to keep the door open forever. Letting go doesn't mean what you had didn't matter. It doesn't erase the memories, the connection, or the time you shared. It just means you're choosing to stop living in the past. You're choosing to stop punishing yourself by holding on to something that no longer exists, and that choice takes strength, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. I know part of you is scared. Scared that letting go means starting over. Scared that you won't feel that way about anyone else again. Scared that this was your one chance at something special. But that fear is lying to you. Life doesn't give you just one opportunity for love, connection, or happiness. It gives you many, but only if you make space for them. The sooner you let go, the sooner you heal. The sooner you stop checking their page, rereading old messages, and asking yourself what you did wrong, the sooner you start moving forward. And moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting. It means allowing yourself to grow past this version of your life. Good things are going to come again, not the exact same things, not the same person, not the same situation, but something new, something healthier, something that won't leave you feeling confused, unchosen, or stuck. I promise you that. So let this be your reminder. You don't need to keep holding on to prove how much you cared. You've done enough. It's okay to release what no longer serves you. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is finally say goodbye, even when part of you still wishes they'd stay. You know that one friend who always looks fine on the outside? The one who never really asks for help? The one who somehow holds everything together without making a sound? They're the one who cracks jokes when the room feels awkward, the one who lightens the mood when things get heavy, the one who says, "I'm good," so casually that nobody questions it. But if you look closely, their eyes tell a different story. They're always there, always listening, always giving advice, always making time. If someone's hurting, they show up. If someone needs comfort, they provide it. If someone feels lost, they help them find direction. They became the glue without ever asking to be. And over time, they learned something dangerous. They learned that people rely on them being strong. They learned that when they show pain, it makes others uncomfortable, so they stop showing it. They mastered the art of looking okay. You don't see how tired they really are. You don't see the nights they sit in silence, staring at nothing, trying to keep themselves from falling apart. They laugh, but it's lighter now. They smile, but it doesn't reach the same place as it used to. They say they're just tired, when in reality they're exhausted in ways sleep can't fix. They learned how to bottle everything up, how to swallow emotions mid-sentence, how to carry pain quietly so no one else has to deal with it, because they don't want to be a burden. They don't want to ruin the mood. They don't want to take up space. So they shrink themselves emotionally, even while holding space for everyone else. And the craziest part, they're not asking to be saved. They don't want attention. They don't want pity. They don't want grand gestures. They just want someone to notice, someone to really ask how they're doing and actually stay for the answer. Someone to notice that their laughter sounds a little forced lately, that their messages are shorter, that they're physically present but mentally somewhere else. Someone to say, "You don't have to be strong right now," because being the strong one gets lonely. You carry everyone else's weight and still feel guilty for having your own. You feel like you don't have permission to fall apart because everyone else depends on you staying together. But even strong people need rest. Even strong people need to cry. Even strong people need reassurance. Strength doesn't mean never breaking. It means breaking quietly and still showing up. And that's not fair. So if you have that friend, the one who's always okay, the one who never complains, the one who holds everyone else together, check on them, not with a quick "you good?" Not with a surface level question. Check on them with presence, with patience, with a real conversation. Because sometimes the people who seem the most okay are the ones who need love the most. And sometimes all it takes is one person finally seeing them for the weight they've been carrying alone. Don't waste your teenage years obsessing over love. It's easy to fall into that trap. You watch movies, shows, social media, high school sweethearts, perfect relationships, young love that looks magical from the outside, so you start thinking you need that too. Like, if you don't experience love early, you're missing out on something important, so you chase it. You talk to people just to not be alone. You stay in situations that don't feel right just so you can say you're with someone. You keep trying to make things work that clearly aren't working, and slowly, without realizing it, it starts tearing you down. Your confidence drops, your sense of self gets blurry, you stop knowing who you are outside of liking someone or wanting to be liked back. Your mood depends on replies, attention, validation, and that's dangerous at that age. When you're young, you're not supposed to have everything figured out. You're supposed to be discovering who you are, what you like, what you stand for, what kind of person you want to become. But when all your energy goes into chasing relationships, you neglect that part of yourself. You start building your identity around other people instead of building it from within. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most teenage relationships don't last, not because you did something wrong, not because love isn't real, but because you're both still growing, still changing, still figuring life out. And forcing love before you even know yourself is like trying to build something on an unstable foundation. It cracks every time. If something isn't flowing naturally, stop forcing it. Love isn't supposed to feel like constant stress, chasing, or proving your worth. If it's meant to happen, it won't require you to lose yourself to keep it. And the thing nobody wants to hear? Desperation pushes people away. Confidence attracts them. When you stop hunting for love and start working on yourself, things shift. You become more grounded, more secure, more you. And that's when real connections show up naturally. You still have so much life ahead of you, so much fun to have, so many experiences that don't revolve around relationships. Don't let anxiety over love rob you of your youth. Love will come, but it shouldn't come at the cost of who you are. Right now, the most important relationship you can build is the one with yourself. Here's what happens when you slow down and stop chasing love so hard. You start hearing yourself again, your own thoughts, your own wants. You realize how much noise you were living with, always wondering if someone liked you back, always questioning where you stood, always trying to be enough for someone who barely knew who they were either. When you're young, your heart is open, but your identity is still forming. That's a dangerous mix. You attach quickly because you don't yet have roots in yourself. So when something ends, it doesn't just hurt, it shakes your entire sense of worth. You don't just lose a person, you lose who you thought you were with them. That's why breakups feel world-ending at that age. Not because the love was deeper, but because you were still becoming you. And every time something falls apart, you start questioning yourself instead of realizing it was just part of growth. When you step back from chasing relationships, you give yourself room to breathe. Room to build confidence that isn't dependent on attention. Room to develop interests, skills, goals. Room to fail at things that don't involve your heart breaking. And those failures, they teach you way more than forcing a relationship ever could. You also learn how to be alone without feeling lonely. That's huge, because once you can enjoy your own company, you stop settling for people who treat you like an option. You stop forcing conversations. You stop chasing mixed signals. You start choosing peace over drama, and the wild part is, once you stop looking desperate for love, you become more attractive without trying, not because you change your appearance, but because you carry yourself differently. You're not reaching for validation anymore. You're grounded, you're present, you're whole on your own. Love hits different when it finds you like that. When it comes from alignment instead of need, when it adds to your life instead of becoming your life. So don't rush it, don't force it, don't let relationships define you before you even know yourself. There's no prize for loving early, but there is power in loving wisely. Here's what happens when you slow down and stop chasing love so hard. You start hearing yourself again, your own thoughts, your own wants. You realize how much noise you were living with, always wondering if someone liked you back, always questioning where you stood, always trying to be enough for someone who barely knew who they were either. When you're young, your heart is open, but your identity is still forming. That's a dangerous mix. You attach quickly because you don't yet have roots in yourself. So when something ends, it doesn't just hurt, it shakes your entire sense of worth. You don't just lose a person, you lose who you thought you were with them. That's why breakups feel world-ending at that age. Not because the love was deeper, but because you were still becoming you. And every time something falls apart, you start questioning yourself instead of realizing it was just part of growth. When you step back from chasing relationships, you give yourself room to breathe, room to build confidence that isn't dependent on attention, room to develop interests, skills, goals, room to fail at things that don't involve your heart breaking. And those failures, they teach you way more than forcing a relationship ever could. You also learn how to be alone without feeling lonely. That's huge, because once you can enjoy your own company, you stop settling for people who treat you like an option. You stop forcing conversations. You stop chasing mixed signals. You start choosing peace over drama. And the wild part is, once you stop looking desperate for love, you become more attractive without trying. Not because you changed your appearance, but because you carry yourself differently. You're not reaching for validation anymore. You're grounded, you're present, you're whole on your own. Love hits different when it finds you like that, when it comes from alignment instead of need, when it adds to your life instead of becoming your life. So don't rush it, don't force it, don't let relationships define you before you even know yourself. There's no prize for loving early, but there is power in loving wisely. The truth is, love isn't something you're late to. There's no deadline where if you don't find it by a certain age you've failed. That pressure is made up. It comes from comparison, from watching other people's highlights and assuming they're ahead of you. But everyone's path is different, and forcing yourself to keep up only makes you miss what's right in front of you. When you focus on yourself first, something happens. You stop romanticizing every connection. You stop projecting futures onto people who haven't even earned a place in your present. You start asking better questions, not just, do they like me? And do I even like how I feel around? That shift changes everything. You realize that love shouldn't drain you. It shouldn't make you anxious all the time. It shouldn't make you abandon your goals, your friendships, or your sense of direction. Real love fits into your life, it doesn't consume it. And you can't recognize that until you've spent time building a life you actually care about. This is also when you learn patience. Not the kind where you wait around hoping someone chooses you, but the kind where you trust that what's meant for you won't require you to chase it down. You stop running toward people and start walking toward yourself. And ironically, that's when people start noticing you more. Because confidence isn't loud. It's calm. It's knowing you're okay whether someone stays or goes. It's choosing people who choose you back without hesitation. And that kind of energy doesn't come from trying to be loved. It comes from being at peace with who you are. So don't rush love. Don't let loneliness make your decision. Don't let movies or social media convince you you're behind, you're not behind, you're building. And when love does show up, real love, you'll be ready for it, not desperate for it. One day you'll look back and realize how important this time was, not because of who you dated or didn't date, but because of who you became when no one was choosing you romantically. These are the years where you learn discipline, where you learn how to sit with discomfort instead of running to someone to distract you from it, where you learn how to build something that lasts longer than a temporary connection. When you stop making love the center of your world, you start seeing everything else clearly. Your friendships get stronger, Your goals feel more meaningful. Your confidence comes from progress, not attention. And you realize how dangerous it is to let someone else be the source of your happiness before you even know how to create it yourself. This is also when you start setting standards instead of expectations. Expectations are hoping someone becomes what you want. Standards are knowing what you will and won't accept. And standards only come from self-respect. You don't develop that by chasing validation. You develop it by choosing yourself consistently. There's a version of you that exists when you're not worried about being loved. That version is focused, curious, hungry for growth. That version doesn't beg to be chosen because he knows his value isn't determined by who stays. And that's the version of you that real love is actually drawn to. So let love be something that complements your life, not something that defines. Let relationships come from alignment, not loneliness. And trust that when the timing is right, when you're solid in who you are, love won't feel like something you have to chase. It'll feel like something that finally makes sense. You're not missing out, you're preparing. What people don't talk about enough is how much damage comes from learning love the wrong way too early. When you grow up thinking love is supposed to be chaotic, unstable, and uncertain, you carry that blueprint into adulthood. You start associating butterflies with anxiety. You mistake emotional inconsistency for passion, and you end up chasing people who mirror the same confusion you never heal. That's why taking time for yourself isn't selfish. It's preventative. It teaches you how to recognize healthy connection when it finally appears, because healthy love doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't make you question your worth. It doesn't feel like you're constantly auditioning to be chosen. When you build yourself first, you stop trying to earn love. You expect it to be mutual. You expect effort to be consistent. You expect respect to be automatic. And if it's not there, you walk away without turning it into a personal failure. You also learn how to love without losing yourself. You keep your routines, your goals, your sense of direction. Love becomes something that adds warmth to your life, not something that replaces, and that balance is something you can only learn when you've spent time standing on your own. The biggest mistake isn't being alone when you're young. The mistake is tying your self-worth to relationships before you understand who you are without. You don't need someone to complete you. You need to complete yourself enough that love becomes a choice, not a necessity. So let yourself grow. Let yourself evolve without pressure. Let love meet you when you're ready to share your love, not escape, because the strongest love stories don't start with desperation. They start with self-respect. Eventually, you reach a point where you realize how quiet confidence actually feels. It's not loud, it's not flexing, it's not proving anything to anyone, it's waking up knowing even if no one texts you today, you're still okay, that your life still has direction, that your worth didn't disappear because someone didn't choose you. That's the version of you love is meant to meet. When you're young, it's easy to think love will save you, that once you find the right person, everything else will fall into place. But real growth teaches you the opposite. You build the life first, you build stability, purpose, discipline, and self-respect. And then love fits into that life naturally instead of becoming the thing you rely on to feel whole. This is why rushing relationships too early can stunt you. You start making decisions based on fear of losing someone instead of what's best for your future. You compromise your goal. You stay small to keep someone comfortable, and you don't even realize it's happening until you look back and feel behind. Taking time for yourself isn't missing. It's an investment. Every day you spend learning who you are, strengthening your mind, improving your habits, and building something meaningful is setting you up for a healthier connection later. One where love doesn't feel like pressure, but partnership. And when that love finally comes, you won't feel like you're holding your breath. You won't feel anxious or unsure. You'll feel steady, chosen, at peace. That's how you'll know you didn't rush one day, love will find you when you're not looking for it. Not because you gave up on it, but because you stopped needing it to validate you. You'll meet someone when you're comfortable in your own skin, when your life already has meaning, and when you're not trying to fill a void with another person. And when that happens, it won't feel like chaos. It won't feel like chasing or guessing or proving. It'll feel natural, balanced, safe, like two people choosing each other, not out of loneliness, but out of intention. You'll be glad you didn't rush. You'll be grateful for the nights you spent alone building yourself instead of forcing something that would have only distracted. You'll realize that the love you were searching for externally was something you were always meant to cultivate internally first. So if you're young and feeling behind, if you're single and feeling pressured, breathe. If you're watching everyone else pair up and wondering when it'll be your turn, trust the timing. Love isn't a race. And your life isn't measured by who you dated in your teens. Protect your peace, build your... Enjoy being young. The rest will... Some nights, I stay up hugging my pillow pretending it's someone. Not because I'm dramatic, but because it gets lonely when no one chooses you. You start wondering if love just missed you, if maybe everyone else got picked and you were the one who got skipped over. I tell myself I'm fine being alone, and most days I am. But late at night, when the world is quiet, that's when the question comes back. Will love ever find me? Or am I just meant to imagine it? I think the hardest part is not the loneliness. It's feeling like you have so much love to give and nowhere to put it, no hands to hold, no one to come home to, just you, your thoughts, and the same hope you keep tucking away every morning. And what scares me most is not being alone right now. It's the thought that maybe this is permanent. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being unchosen does. It's watching people find each other while you keep ending up by yourself. It's being told, your time will come so many times that it starts to feel like a placeholder sentence. You start questioning yourself. Am I too quiet? Too much? Not enough? You replay everything, trying to find the reason no one stayed. And late at night, when you're hugging a pillow imagining it's someone who wants you back, those thoughts get louder. Not because you don't love yourself, but because you're tired of being the only one who does. The scary part is how slowly it affects your worth. You don't stop believing in love, you stop believing it wants you, and that's when loneliness becomes heavier than silence, because now it's not just about being alone, it's about wondering if something is wrong with you for being alone this long. This feeling doesn't mean you're unlovable, even though it really feels like it. It means you've been alone long enough for the silence to start telling stories. And silence is loud when it goes on too long. You start mistaking timing for rejection. You start turning waiting into a flaw. You start thinking love hasn't found you because you're missing something. But love doesn't work on fairness, and it doesn't run on schedules. Some people find it early. Some people find it after they've learned how to sit with themselves at night. And that doesn't make you behind. It makes you human. The fact that you still want love, still imagine it, still hope for it, even after feeling unchosen, that's not weakness. That's proof your heart didn't close. Imagining love at night doesn't make you desperate. It means you're human. You're not hugging a pillow because you're weak. You're doing it because your body remembers what closeness feels like, even when your life hasn't caught up yet. There's nothing wrong with wanting someone to come home to, with wishing there was a hand to reach for when the day finally goes quiet. The problem isn't that you imagine love, it's that you've been alone long enough to start believing wanting it is something you need to outgrow. But love isn't something you mature out of, something you wait for without turning against yourself in the meantime. You don't need to shame the part of you that still hopes at night. That part is just proof you haven't gone numb, and as long as you haven't gone numb, love hasn't missed you. Loneliness at night doesn't get to decide your future. Even when it feels endless, nights are heavy because they strip everything down. No distractions, no noise, just you and the question you try not to ask during the day. But night feelings aren't prophecies. They're just unmet needs speaking when everything else is quiet. Being alone right now doesn't mean you'll always be alone. And being unchosen so far doesn't mean you're unchoosable. It just means you haven't been met yet. There's a difference. You're not behind. You're not forgotten. You're not running out of time. You're just in the part of the story where love hasn't arrived, not the part where it never does. The hardest balance is holding hope without turning it into self-doubt, because when you hope for something for a long time, it can start to feel personal when it hasn't arrived yet. You tell yourself you're patient, but underneath that, there's a quiet fear that maybe hope is just another way of setting yourself up, so you try to numb it. You tell yourself you don't need love, you act like you're fine on your own, but hope doesn't disappear that way. It just goes quiet and waits for the night. The truth is, hope isn't isn't the problem. Hope only hurts when you turn it inward and use it as proof that something is wrong with you. You're allowed to hope without questioning your worth. You're allowed to want love without it meaning you're lacking. Hope isn't weakness. It's just your heart still believing in a future you haven't reached yet. When love hasn't found you yet, it can make you feel invisible. You're moving through life unnoticed, unchosen, easy to pass by. But invisibility isn't the truth. It's just what loneliness whispers when it's tired of waiting. You don't get overlooked because you lack something. You get overlooked because connection isn't something you can force into timing. The right person doesn't miss you because they're better at noticing. They find you because they're looking for what you already are. And until then, you're not invisible. You're just living in the space before recognition. That space feels quiet. It feels long. It feels unfair. But it isn't empty. It's shaping you into someone who will recognize real love when it finally arrives. Not because you're desperate for it, but because you're ready to receive it without disappearing into it. Love usually doesn't find you when you're proving you deserve it. It finds you when you stop performing and start existing. For a long time, I thought if I was good enough, patient enough, understanding enough, someone would finally see me. So I overgave, overthought, overexplained. But love doesn't arrive as a reward for endurance. It arrives when you're no longer shrinking to be easier to choose. The moment you stop asking, what do I need to fix? And start asking, what do I need to feel safe? Something shifts. You don't chase connection anymore, you allow it. And that doesn't make love come faster, and it makes it come healthier. Because the love that finds you then isn't choosing you because you tried hard enough. It's choosing you because you're finally standing still as yourself. Waiting is hard because it's empty time. Not empty in life, but empty in connection. You're still living, still growing, still doing everything you're supposed to do, but there's no one to share the quiet with, and that's where loneliness sneaks in. The difference between waiting and loneliness is what you tell yourself while you're there. Loneliness says, nothing is happening because I'm not enough. Waiting says, something hasn't arrived yet, and that's not a reflection of my worth. Learning to sit in the waiting doesn't mean pretending you don't want love. It means refusing to let the absence of it turn into self-blame. You can want love deeply and still treat yourself gently in the meantime. You can feel the quiet without letting it convince you that this is all there will ever be, because waiting isn't where your story ends. It's just the space between who you've been and who you're about to meet. There's a moment when hope stops hurting, not because love arrived, but because you stop fighting yourself while waiting. You stop asking the question every night with fear in it. You still want love, you still imagine it, but it no longer feels like your life is on hold without it. Hope becomes something gentle, something you carry, not something that weighs you down. You realize love finding you was never about being chosen faster or proving you're worthy enough. It was about becoming someone who doesn't disappear while waiting to be seen. And when that shift happens, loneliness loosens its grip, not because you're no longer alone, but because you're no longer against yourself. That's when hope becomes safe again, and that's usually right before love finally knows where to find you. Some nights you still wish someone was there, and that doesn't mean the healing didn't work. It just means you're human. Missing connection isn't a setback. It's not proof you're regressing or going backward. It's just your heart remembering what it wants to share. The difference now is that the wanting doesn't hurt the same. It doesn't spiral. It doesn't turn into panic. It doesn't make you question your worth. It just exists. You can want love without feeling empty without it. You can imagine closeness without feeling broken when it's not there yet. And that's growth. Because you're no longer waiting with desperation. You're waiting with trust. Trust that love doesn't miss people who are becoming more themselves. It finds them when they're steady enough to receive it without disappearing. The love that finds you after this season feels different, not louder, not dramatic, safer. It doesn't make you question yourself. It doesn't make you wonder where you stand. It doesn't ask you to stay up at night holding space for uncertainty. It meets you where you are. And because you've spent time alone, because you've learned how to sit with yourself, you don't cling to it, you appreciate it, you don't lose yourself in it because you know what it feels like to hold yourself first. That's why this waiting was never a punishment, it was preparation, not to make you stronger in a hard way, but steadier in a soft one. So if you're still alone right now, still asking if love will ever find you, it will. And when it does, you'll understand why it couldn't find you earlier. You weren't meant to be met when you were questioning your worth. You were meant to be met when you finally believed you were already enough. enough? If you're asking that question right now, it doesn't mean you're behind. It means you're honest. You're honest about wanting connection, about feeling alone sometimes, about hoping there's more than just nights where you hug a pillow and imagine what could be. And that honesty matters. Love doesn't find people who gave up on it. It finds people who stayed open even when it hurt, people who learned how to be alone without becoming bitter, who waited without turning against themselves. So no, love didn't miss you. It just hasn't arrived yet. And when it does, it won't feel like something you chased or finally earned. It'll feel like something that recognizes you, like it knew where you were the whole time, and suddenly those nights won't feel so heavy anymore. Not because you forgot them, but because they led you right where you were meant to be. One day you won't ask the question anymore, not because love arrived overnight, but because you stopped measuring your life by what's missing. You'll still want connection, you'll still imagine it sometimes, but it won't feel heavy. You'll realize you didn't waste these nights. You were learning how to stay gentle in a quiet season. And that matters, because the love that eventually finds you won't have to convince you that you're worth choosing. You'll already know. And when someone finally holds you, it won't feel like something you waited forever for. It'll feel like something that arrived right when you were ready to be seen, not as someone hoping to be chosen, but as someone whole. Being the introvert in the relationship means loving someone who lives louder than you do. They talk easily, they fill rooms, they connect fast, and you listen, you observe. You need quiet to recharge after loving hard. Sometimes it feels like you're standing next to someone who shines effortlessly while you glow quietly. They want to go out, you want to stay in, they gain energy from people, you lose it even when you're happy. And the hardest part is not the difference. It's wondering if your quiet way of loving is enough. Because you don't always say everything, you don't always show excitement loudly, but when you choose someone, you choose them deeply. Being the introvert doesn't mean you love less. It means you love in a way that's calm, steady, and intentional, and sometimes that gets misunderstood. Being with an extrovert means watching them move through the world with ease. They make friends everywhere, they're invited everywhere, people are drawn to them naturally, and sometimes, standing next to that, you wonder where you fit, not because they make you feel small, but because you don't take up space the same way. They thrive in crowds. You count the minutes until you can recharge. They talk things out loud. You process everything internally first, and there are moments where you feel guilty for needing quiet after a long day of loving them. You worry that asking for space sounds like distance, that needing alone time sounds like disinterest, but the truth is, your silence isn't absence. It's how you stay present without burning out. Loving loudly isn't the only way to love deeply, and being quieter doesn't mean you're less committed. It just means your love lives in steadiness, not spotlight. The unspoken fear is that one day you won't be enough, that they'll want more noise, more people, more energy than you can give. You worry they'll mistake your calm for boredom, your need for quiet for distance. You love them deeply but not loudly, and sometimes you wonder if that difference will matter too much. You don't compete for attention, you don't need constant stimulation, you just want connection that feels safe and real. The fear isn't that they'll leave, it's that they'll outgrow you without realizing you were loving them in the only way that feels honest to you. But loving quietly doesn't mean loving less. It means choosing them without the performance. It means staying without needing the room to notice. The right partner won't need you to be louder, they'll need you to be you. Introverts love deeply in ways that aren't always obvious. You remember details, you notice shifts in mood, you feel things before they're said. While they're talking to the room, you're paying attention to them. You're the one who listens after the party ends, the one who creates calm when everything feels loud, the one who offers presence instead of constant stimulation. Your love shows up in consistency, not volume, in choosing the same person again and again, even when it's quiet, even when no one's watching. And often your extroverted partner doesn't realize how much they need that until life gets overwhelming, until they're tired, until the noise fades, until they need someone who knows how to stay still with them. That's when your kind of love becomes the anchor. Not flashy, not loud, just steady. Introverts and extroverts can work beautifully together, but only when both ways of loving are respected. You don't need to become louder to be enough for them, and they don't need to become quieter to be right for you. What matters is understanding that your need for space isn't rejection, that their need for people isn't avoidance. You recharge differently, but you can still meet in the middle. When an extrovert learns that quiet isn't distance, and an introvert learns that excitement isn't chaos, something soft happens. You stop trying to fix each other, you start protecting each other, you give them grounding, they give you expansion, and suddenly The difference that once felt like a risk becomes the balance that makes the relationship work. Asking for space doesn't mean you love them less. It means you know yourself. Introverts don't pull away to create distance. They pull away to come back whole. But asking for that space can feel heavy. You worry it sounds like rejection. You worry they'll take it personally. You worry needing time alone makes you difficult to love. The right partner won't hear, "I need space," as "I don't want you." They'll hear it as, "I'm taking care of myself so I can show up better." You don't need to apologize for how you recharge. You don't need to explain it every time. Love doesn't require constant closeness to be real. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for a relationship is step back for a moment, not to disconnect, but to return as yourself. Introverts show love in quiet, steady ways. You remember the little things they forget they mentioned. You notice when their mood shifts before they say anything. You check in without being asked. Your love isn't loud. It's consistent. It's making space for them after a long day. It's choosing them in calm moments, not just exciting ones. It's staying present when things slow down. Sometimes you wish they could see it more clearly. Not because you need praise, but because your love doesn't always announce itself. But the right partner will feel it. They'll feel it in how safe they are with you, and how calm things get around you, and how you stay, even when nothing exciting is happening. Quiet love isn't invisible. It's just not performing, and the people who value depth will always recognize it. It's easy to compare yourself to an extroverted partner, to wonder why you don't light up rooms, why you don't want constant plans, why loving quietly feels like a disadvantage. But your quiet nature isn't something to fix, it's something that brings balance. You offer depth in a world of noise, you offer presence in a world of distraction, you offer steadiness when everything else feels fast. You don't compete for attention, you create connection. And when you stop comparing, something shifts. You stop shrinking next to their energy. You stop questioning your value. You stop feeling like you need to match them to be worthy of love. You realize your calm isn't less than their excitement. It's what gives the relationship somewhere to rest. And the right partner won't ask you to be louder. They'll thank you for being grounding. One of the quiet fears is being replaced by louder energy, by someone more outgoing, more exciting, more effortless in social spaces. You worry that your calm won't be enough forever. But the truth is, people don't stay for volume. They stay for how they feel when everything slows down. An extroverted partner may enjoy attention, but they rest in safety. They recharge in understanding. They stay where they feel accepted without having to perform, and that's where you shine. You offer a place where they don't have to impress anyone, where they can be tired, where they can be real. Loud energy is easy to find, steady presence is not, and the partner who truly values you won't look for replacement. They'll recognize that your quiet way of loving is exactly what makes the relationship feel secure. Being the introvert was never a disadvantage. It just doesn't announce itself. Your love lasts because it isn't fueled by excitement alone. It's built on presence, on listening, on staying when things are quiet and ordinary. You don't love for the room, you love for the person. And that kind of love doesn't fade when the noise does. The right partner won't ask you to be louder, faster, or different. They'll appreciate that with you. Love feels steady instead of overwhelming, safe instead of performative. So if you've ever felt like your quiet nature made you harder to love, it didn't. It made you the place someone can finally rest. And that's not less, that's rare. Loving quietly doesn't mean loving halfway. It means you choose depth over display. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room to be the most meaningful presence in someone's life. The right partner won't measure love by energy levels. They'll feel it in consistency, in safety, in how calm it feels to be with you. And one day you'll realize something simple. Your quiet wasn't something they had to tolerate. It was the reason they felt at home. I found out what she really thought of me, and I wish I didn't, because in my head, it was different. I thought she respected me. I thought she valued me. I thought the way I showed up actually meant something to her. But the truth, it wasn't what I believed. And it didn't come out in a direct way. Not a conversation. Not something she sat me down and said. It came out indirectly. Through things I wasn't supposed to hear, through how she spoke when I wasn't around. And that's when it hit me. The version of me in her head wasn't the same as the version of me I thought she saw. At first I didn't want to believe it because it didn't match how she acted around me. With me, she seemed calm, interested, like she actually cared. But what I heard didn't sound like that version of her at all. It sounded detached, like I wasn't that important, like I was just there. And that's what messes with you. When someone treats you one way to your face and thinks something completely different behind it, because now you don't know what was real, the way she talked to you, or the way she talked about you. And once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it. Every memory started changing. Moments that felt genuine started feeling questionable. Things she said started sounding different in my head because now I was looking at everything through a new lens, a more honest one. And the more I thought about it, the more it started making sense. Why sometimes her energy felt off. Why sometimes I felt like I was trying harder. Why something always felt slightly uneven. I just didn't want to accept it back then. Because when you care about someone, you don't want to believe they see you differently than you see them. You want to believe it's mutual, that the respect is equal, that the value is the same on both sides. But it wasn't. Not really. Because if she truly saw me the way I thought she did, she wouldn't have spoken about me like that. She wouldn't have minimized what I was giving. She wouldn't have treated my presence like something replaceable. And that's the part that hits your ego. Not in a loud way, in a quiet way. Because now you're not just dealing with losing her. You're dealing with realizing how little you meant in her perspective. While you were taking her seriously, she wasn't taking you the same way, and that imbalance, it hurts more than the ending. For a while I started questioning myself, like maybe I misread everything. Maybe I thought it was deeper than it actually was. Maybe I gave too much meaning to something that wasn't built to hold it, because when someone sees you as less than what you believed, it makes you feel like you got it wrong. But here's what I had to understand. Just because she didn't value me properly, doesn't mean I wasn't valuable. The problem wasn't who I was, it was how she saw me. And you can't control that. You can show up right, you can be real, you can be consistent, but if someone already has a limited view of you, they're going to treat you based on that, no matter how you show up. And that's why nothing I did changed it, because the issue wasn't effort, it was perception. Once I understood that, the pain started shifting, because now it wasn't about trying to prove something to her anymore. It was about realizing I was giving energy to someone who didn't even see it properly. And that's a different kind of clarity, because it makes you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop trying to be understood by someone who already decided how they see you. And honestly, I'm glad I found out, even though it hurt, because I would have kept going, thinking it was deeper than it actually was, thinking she valued me the way I valued her, and that would have kept me stuck. But the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, it frees you. So yeah, then I found out what she really thought of me, and it wasn't what I expected, but now I see it clearly. The right person doesn't make you question your value. They don't talk about you like you're nothing. They don't treat you like you're replaceable. They see you fully, clearly, and they move accordingly. So I'm not mad at what I found out. I'm just glad I didn't stay blind to it, because now I know one thing for sure. I'd rather know the truth than keep believing something that was never real. I stayed loyal, even when it got hard, even when we were arguing more than laughing, even when my friends were telling me I deserved better, even when I felt unappreciated. I stayed, not because I didn't have options, not because I couldn't walk away, but because when I commit fully. Loyalty isn't something I switch on and off depending on how I feel that week. It's a decision, and I made it. I ignored distractions, I curved attention, I shut down conversations that crossed boundaries, not because I was scared of getting caught, but because I respected what we had. So when I found out she didn't stay loyal, it didn't just hurt, it confused me, because how do two people sit in the same relationship and value it completely differently? The part that messed with me wasn't just the betrayal, it was a realization that while I was protecting us, she was exploring her options. While I was defending her name in rooms she wasn't in, she was entertaining someone else's attention. While I was shutting down temptation quietly, she was responding to it. And that imbalance hits deeper than people realize, because loyalty isn't loud. You don't get applause for it. No one congratulates you for not cheating. It's invisible, it's internal, it's discipline. So when you find out the person you were loyal to didn't have that same discipline, it makes you feel stupid for being solid, like you overinvested, like you believed in something that wasn't mutual. I started replaying everything, playing Was she distant because she was already talking to someone else? Were those late replies really just being busy? Was I fighting for something that was already slipping away? Because once trust cracks, your mind rewrites history. You start connecting dots that might not even be there. And that's exhausting, because loyalty is built on trust, and once trust is broken, even your memories feel unstable. I wasn't perfect, but I was faithful, and that matters, because loyalty isn't about being flawless, it's about being intentional. It's about choosing your partner even when temptation is available. It's about respecting boundaries even when no one is watching. And I did that, she didn't. What hurts the most is knowing I would have never done that to her. I wouldn't have risked what we built for a moment of validation. I wouldn't have jeopardized long-term trust for short-term attention, because I understood the weight of betrayal, and she didn't treat it like it was heavy. That's what breaks something inside you, not just the act, the carelessness, because cheating isn't always about love disappearing. Sometimes it's about discipline disappearing. And if someone lacks discipline and loyalty, they'll lack it when things get hard too. For a while I questioned myself. Was I too available, too forgiving, too trusting? Did my loyalty make me predictable? Because when you get betrayed, your brain tries to find ways to avoid feeling powerless again. But here's the truth. My loyalty wasn't weakness, it was character. And her disloyalty wasn't power, it was immaturity. There's a difference. One requires strength, the other requires impulse. People think being cheated on makes you look foolish, but the real foolishness is betraying someone who was solid. I lost someone who didn't value loyalty. She lost someone who actually lived by it. And those are two very different losses, because I can recover, I can heal, I can rebuild, but replacing someone who is genuinely loyal, that's harder than people think. I don't regret staying loyal, even knowing how it ended, because my character doesn't shift based on someone else's behavior. I don't cheat because I'm angry. I don't entertain options because I'm bored. I don't step out because things feel heavy. If I'm unhappy, I leave. I don't betray, and that standard stays with me, not for her, for me. The scary part after betrayal is this: you start wondering if loyalty is even worth it, if everyone cheats eventually, if trusting deeply just makes you vulnerable. But I refuse to let someone else's lack of integrity change mine, because loyalty isn't outdated, it's rare. And rare doesn't mean foolish, it means valuable. She didn't stay loyal, but that says nothing about my worth. It says everything about her discipline, her boundaries, her emotional maturity. Because if someone can look at loyalty and still step outside it, they were never anchored. And I don't want someone who floats when things get tested. I want someone who stands. I stayed loyal, even when it was inconvenient, even when it was tempting not to, even when I felt underappreciated, and I'll stay that way. Not because everyone deserves it, but because I deserve to be someone who lives by principle. She didn't stay loyal, and that hurt, but I'd rather be the one who was solid than the one who couldn't hold a commitment. Because loyalty doesn't make you weak, it makes you rare, and one day someone will recognize that instead of testing it. You know what actually hurts? Wanting to be in love, but realizing you can't stay in it. You finally meet someone good, they're kind, they're loyal, they care about you in a way that feels real. On paper, they're everything you're supposed to want, and for a moment you think, maybe this is it. But then they like you back, and something in you shuts off, not slowly, not gently. It's like the feeling disappears overnight. You try to force it. You tell yourself to be grateful. You try to match their energy, their effort, their love, but instead of growing closer, you start pulling away. You notice flaws that didn't bother you before. You get irritated over small things. You find reasons to create distance, and suddenly you're the problem. On the outside, it looks like you're sabotaging something good, like you're avoiding someone who treats you right. But inside, it feels worse than that. It feels suffocating, because even when you try to stay, it feels like you're trapped in something you can't feel the way you're supposed to. The messed up part, you still care. Somewhere deep down, you don't want to hurt them. You don't want to be cold. You don't want to be the reason someone feels unwanted, but you also don't know how to love them without losing yourself. And that kind of conflict turns love into guilt. What's confusing about this feeling is that it only shows up with the right kind of person, not the chaotic ones, not the ones who make you anxious, not the ones who disappear and keep you guessing. It happens with the ones who are steady, the ones who reply, who show up, who don't play games with your emotions, and instead of feeling safe, your body reacts like something's wrong. You don't feel excitement, you feel pressure, not because they're asking for too much, but because they're offering consistency, and you don't know how to relax inside it. There's no chase, no uncertainty, no emotional roller coaster to distract you. So your mind starts searching for escape routes. You tell yourself you're bored, that the spark is gone, that something feels off, and even if you can't explain why. But deep down, it's not disinterest, it's unfamiliarity, because when you're used to love being unstable, peace can feel empty. And when you're used to earning affection, being chosen freely can feel undeserved. So instead of leaning in, you pull away, you create distance so you can breathe again, not because they're hurting you, but because closeness is touching something unhealed. And that's the part nobody prepares you for. Sometimes the problem isn't that you don't want love, it's that you've never learned how to stay when love doesn't hurt. At some point, this starts to mess with how you see yourself, because now you're not just confused, you're guilty. You look at them and think, yeah, they didn't do anything wrong. They're patient, they're kind, they're trying, and you're the one pulling back. So you start labeling yourself cold, broken, unappreciative, the person who ruins good things. From the outside, it looks simple. Why would you walk away from someone who treats you right? But what they don't see is how trapped you feel inside the expectation to feel something you can't force. You don't hate them. You hate the pressure to become the version of yourself that knows how to stay. So instead of being honest, you distance yourself, you reply slower, you stop initiating. You hope they'll lose interest so you don't have to explain yourself. And that's the part that hurts the most, not losing them, hurting someone who didn't deserve it. You carry that with you. The knowledge that somewhere someone is wondering what they did wrong, when the truth is you just didn't know how to receive what they were offering. And that realization sits heavy, because wanting love but not knowing how to hold it feels like a flaw you can't explain, only live with. Avoidance doesn't come from not caring, it comes from caring too much and not knowing how to say it. Because how do you explain something like this without sounding cruel? How do you tell someone, you're good to me, but I don't feel what I'm supposed to feel? There's no gentle way to say that. So instead of explaining, you disappear emotionally. You convince yourself silence is kinder. That distance will hurt less than honesty, but silence creates its own kind of damage. They feel it, the shift, the hesitation, the way your energy isn't the same anymore, and you feel it too. Every message feels heavier. Every interaction feels like a reminder that you're failing at something that should be simple, so you keep avoiding the conversation, hoping clarity will show up on its own, but it doesn't. All that grows is resentment, not toward them, but toward yourself, because now you're stuck between two fears, hurting them by telling the truth, or hurting them slowly by pulling away. And avoidance feels safer in the moment because it delays the guilt, but it doesn't remove it, it just stretches it out. And the longer you stay quiet, the harder it becomes to speak honestly at all. If you look closer, this pattern isn't about them at all. It's about what closeness brings up in you, because real healthy affection doesn't distract you from yourself. It brings you face to face with things you buried, old fears, old wounds, old beliefs about what love costs. When someone is consistent, there's nowhere to hide. You can't blame mixed signals, you can't blame distance, you can't blame uncertainty. All that's left is you, and the part of you that learned early on that love comes with pressure. Pressure to be enough, pressure to stay, pressure to not mess it up. So your system does what it learned to do best. It pulls away before it can fail. Avoidance isn't rejection, it's self-protection. You're not running from them, you're running from the version of yourself that feels exposed when someone chooses you fully, because being wanted means being seen. And being seen means being vulnerable in ways you never learned were safe. So your mind flips the switch. You call it disinterest, you call it boredom, you call it not feeling it, but underneath all of that is fear, not of losing them, but of losing control. Eventually a realization starts to creep in. This isn't about love failing, it's about healing that hasn't happened yet. Because when someone offers you something real, it presses on the places you never finished healing, not because they're doing anything wrong, but because closeness exposes what avoidance kept quiet. Love asks questions you've been dodging. It asks you to be present. It asks you to trust consistency. It asks you to stay when things feel uncomfortable instead of dramatic. And if your past taught you that love comes with loss, your body reacts before your mind can explain it. So instead of leaning in, you shut down, not because you don't care, but because caring activates fear, fear of dependency, fear of responsibility, fear of becoming someone who needs another person, because somewhere along the way, you learned that needing someone meant giving them the power to hurt you. So when love shows up calm and steady, your nervous system mistakes it for danger, and you don't realize what's happening until later, after you've already pulled away, after you've already created distance, after you've already blamed yourself. But this moment matters because once you see that this isn't disinterest, it's unhealed fear, you stop calling yourself broken, you start calling it what it is, a signal. Once you see the pattern, something changes, not overnight, not perfectly, but you stop running on autopilot. You start noticing the moment your body wants to pull away, the urge to detach, the instinct to create distance the second things feel real, and instead of obeying it immediately, you pause. You ask yourself, am I actually uninterested, or am I uncomfortable? That question alone changes everything, because discomfort isn't a red flag, it's a signal. It tells you something important is happening, something unfamiliar, something that requires presence instead of escape. So instead of disappearing, you stay a little longer. You don't force feelings, you don't fake certainty. You just allow yourself to exist inside the discomfort without punishing it. You start choosing honesty over avoidance, not brutal honesty, gentle honesty. I'm confused, I'm scared, I don't know what I'm feeling yet. And for the first time, connection doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like practice. Practice staying, practice communicating, practice letting someone see you without immediately taking that away. You realize something important here. You don't have to feel everything at once. You don't have to be sure. You just have to stop abandoning yourself the moment love asks you to be present. At the end of all this, you start to understand something clearly. Love was never the problem. Fear was. Fear was the thing turning care into pressure. Fear was the thing making peace feel boring. Fear was the thing convincing you that pulling away was safer than staying. When fear stops leading, love feels different. It's quieter, slower, less dramatic. It doesn't hit like chaos. It doesn't demand certainty right away. It doesn't make you feel trapped. It gives you space to exist without disappearing. Real love doesn't ask you to force feelings. It doesn't punish confusion. It doesn't make you feel like you're failing for needing time. It lets you grow into it, and when you stop running, you realize something important. Caring doesn't mean losing yourself. Staying doesn't mean being stuck. And choosing someone doesn't mean giving up control. It just means you're present. You're allowed to learn how to love differently than you were taught. You're allowed to take it slow. You're allowed to feel unsure without self-sabotaging. And most of all, you're allowed to stop hating yourself for struggling with something you were never shown how to do safely, because the moment love stops being about fear is the moment it finally starts feeling real. I'm romantic. I believe in effort, in choosing someone daily, in love that feels intentional, not accidental, but I'm not naive anymore. I don't confuse chemistry with commitment. I don't mistake words for consistency. I don't fall in love with potential and ignore reality to protect the fantasy. That version of me is gone. Being romantic doesn't mean I overlook red flags. It doesn't mean I excuse disrespect. It doesn't mean I stay just because I feel deeply. It means I love with awareness now. I still want connection, still want intimacy, still want something real, but I'm no longer willing to sacrifice my peace just to keep a feeling alive. I know the difference now between someone who feels good and someone who is good for me. I know the difference between affection and effort, between attention and intention, and I don't chase illusions anymore. I won't romanticize someone who can't show up consistently. I won't soften the truth to protect a story I wanted to believe in. I can be tender and still have boundaries, hopeful and still realistic. Romantic doesn't mean blind. It means I care deeply, but I pay attention. And this time I don't fall in love at the expense of myself. I used to think being romantic meant enduring, staying longer than I should, giving the benefit of the doubt even when doubt was all I felt, believing that love meant patience no matter the cost. That's where it went wrong. I mistook tolerance for depth. I confused hope with commitment. I kept softening my boundaries to protect a version of love that wasn't protecting me. That wasn't romance, that was self-abandonment. Being romantic doesn't mean I ignore patterns. It doesn't mean I wait for someone to become who they promise to be. It means I listen when actions contradict words. It means I leave when effort fades. It means I don't negotiate respect just to keep a connection alive. I still believe in love that's big, in feelings that are deep, in choosing someone with intention. But now, romance has standards. I won't pour into uncertainty. I won't romanticize inconsistency. I won't stay where I feel anxious and call it passion. Romantic love should feel safe enough to be honest, stable enough to be real, mutual enough to last, and if it isn't, I don't try to fix it anymore. Because I can be romantic without being reckless with my heart. Being romantic but not naive changes how you choose people from the very beginning. You don't rush connection anymore. You don't get swept up by intensity. You don't confuse attention with alignment. You let things unfold. You watch how someone shows up when it's inconvenient, how they communicate when things are unclear, how they act when they don't get their way. Because attraction is easy, consistency is not. You stop falling for the idea of someone and start paying attention to how they actually treat you. Do they follow through? Do they respect your time? Do they show curiosity about your inner world? Or just enjoy how you make them feel? Being romantic doesn't mean you stop feeling sparks. It means sparks aren't enough anymore. You want safety with the spark, effort with the chemistry, clarity with the feelings, so you slow down, not because you're scared, but because you value yourself too much to rush into something unproven. You let people reveal who they are without trying to fill in the gaps for them. And if something feels off, you don't romanticize it. You listen, because the right connection won't need you to ignore yourself to keep it alive. Being romantic without being naive means I still believe in love. I just don't chase it blindly anymore. I don't force connections. I don't convince people to choose me. I don't stay where effort feels one-sided and call it patience. I let love meet me where I am. If someone wants me, I won't have to guess. If someone cares, I won't have to ask repeatedly. If something is real, it won't require me to ignore my instincts. I still believe in late-night talks, in choosing each other, in building something meaningful, but I don't sacrifice clarity for intensity anymore. I've learned that love isn't proven by how much you're willing to endure. It's proven by how safe you feel being yourself without shrinking, performing, or waiting. So now I don't rush toward feelings just because they're strong. I let actions catch up to words. I let time reveal truth. I let consistency do the convincing. And if someone can't meet me there, I don't make it mean love is dead. I just understand that not every connection is meant to last. I can still be soft, still hopeful, still romantic. I'm just no longer willing to lose myself for the sake of a feeling. Being romantic, not naive, changed what I tolerate. I don't excuse inconsistency anymore. I don't sit with confusion and call it giving things time. I don't ignore the feeling that something is off just because I want it to work. Before, I'd stay and explain. I'd adjust. I'd wait. Now, I observe. If effort fades, I notice. If respect slips, I address it once. If nothing changes, I leave. Not angrily, not dramatically, just clearly. I don't feel guilty walking away from things that don't align anymore, because walking away isn't punishment, it's protection. I used to think romance meant holding on. Now I know it also means knowing when to let go. I still care deeply, still feel intensely, still believe in choosing someone with intention, but I won't romanticize potential at the expense of reality. I won't stay where I feel anxious, unseen, or unsure of my place. Romance without boundaries is just hope with no direction. And now, my heart has standards, not walls, standards. Being romantic and grounded makes love feel quieter than I expected. There's no chaos, no guessing games, no emotional roller coaster disguised as passion. And at first that felt strange. I was used to intensity proving something, used to anxiety meaning I cared, used to confusion keeping me invested. But that wasn't depth, that was instability. Now, romance feels calm. It looks like consistency. It sounds like clear communication. It feels like not having to overthink where I stand. There's still excitement. It's just not fueled by uncertainty. I don't need constant reassurance anymore. I don't need dramatic gesture to feel chosen. I don't need to be chased to feel wanted. Because when something is real, it doesn't keep you on edge. Being romantic doesn't mean I crave fireworks every moment. It means I value safety with the spark, peace with the passion, connection that doesn't cost me my balance. And the biggest shift, I don't mistake calm for boredom anymore. I understand now that love doesn't have to be loud to be meaningful. Sometimes the most romantic thing is feeling secure enough to just be yourself. Being romantic, not naive, changed how I communicate my needs. I don't hint anymore. I don't water things down to avoid being too much. I don't stay silent hoping someone will just figure it out. I say what I need, not aggressively, not defensively, just honestly, because needing clarity isn't pressure. Needing consistency isn't insecurity. Needing effort isn't asking for the world, it's asking for alignment. Before, I was scared that speaking up would push people away, that if I asked for more, I'd lose what I had. Now I understand something important. If honesty scares someone off, they were never meant to stay. I don't over-explain myself anymore. I don't apologize for having standards. I don't negotiate my needs to make someone comfortable. Romance doesn't mean silence. It means trusting that the right person won't feel threatened by clear communication. They won't call it drama. They won't call it too much. They won't make you feel guilty for wanting to feel secure. They'll listen, they'll respond, they'll meet you where you are. And if they don't, I don't take it personally, because being romantic, not naive, means I'd rather be understood slowly than misunderstood forever. Being romantic with boundaries filters people out quietly. You don't have to test anyone, you don't have to interrogate intentions, you don't have to force clarity. You just stay consistent with who you are, you show up honestly, you communicate clearly. You don't overgive to keep someone interested, and that alone does the work. People who only wanted attention get bored. People who thrived on ambiguity get uncomfortable. People who wanted access without effort slowly fade, and you let them, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped chasing. Being romantic, not naive, means you don't audition for love anymore. You don't prove your worth. You don't compete for consistency. You don't bend yourself to be easier to choose. You let people meet you where you stand, and the ones who can't, they remove themselves. That used to scare you. Now it reassures you, because the right connection won't need you to lower your standards to keep it alive. It will rise to meet them. And the most romantic thing about that, you don't have to lose yourself to find love anymore. I still believe in love. That part never left. What changed is who I trust first. I believe in myself now. I trust my intuition when something feels off. I trust my boundaries when they need to be held. I trust my heart without handing it over blindly. Before, I believed love required risk at any cost, that you had to jump first and hope someone caught you. Now I know better. Real love doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. It doesn't punish you for being honest. It doesn't require you to doubt your worth to keep it alive. Being romantic, not naive, means I still dream. I just don't disappear into the dream. I don't ignore red flags to protect the fantasy. I don't silence my needs to keep someone comfortable. I don't romanticize suffering and call it devotion. I let love add to my life, not destabilize it. And the biggest shift of all, I don't fear losing love anymore the way I used to, because I know I won't lose myself trying to keep it. That confidence didn't come from love finding me. It came from me finally standing with myself. Being romantic, not naive, means I didn't lose my softness. I refined it. I still believe in love that's intentional, in effort that's mutual, in choosing someone without hesitation or games, but I no longer confuse love with endurance. I won't stay where I feel uncertain. I won't fight for clarity. I won't romanticize someone's potential while ignoring how they treat me now. Romance isn't blind faith anymore. It's awareness. It's knowing that feelings matter, but actions matter more. That chemistry is exciting, but consistency is what lasts. That love shouldn't cost you your peace, your voice, or yourself. I still want something real. I still want depth. I still want connection that feels meaningful. I just won't abandon myself to get it. If someone meets me with honesty, I open my heart. If they meet me with effort, I lean in. If they meet me halfway, I walk the rest with them. And if they don't, I don't force it. I don't chase it. I don't grieve what was never aligned. Because being romantic doesn't mean I accept less. It means I know exactly what kind of love I want. And I'm patient enough to wait for something that doesn't ask me to be smaller, quieter, or less aware. I'm still a romantic. I just finally learned how to protect my heart without closing it. And that's the difference. I don't care how corny it sounds. I'm not going to stop being a lover. Not until I get the kind of love I've always imagined. The kind where there's no confusion, no wandering attention, no half-interest disguised as effort. Just one person. And a world that feels smaller because of it. I want love where focus doesn't drift, where nobody else even registers, where loving them feels instinctive, not forced. The kind of love that doesn't try to be cinematic, it just is. Two people driving with no destination, standing in open fields, traveling for no reason other than wanting to be together. The kind of love you don't just feel in your chest, you feel it in your soul, hot, intense, alive. And I don't understand how people walk around pretending that kind of love doesn't matter. Like love is casual, like attachment is embarrassing, like caring deeply is something you should hide, because love is everything. It's sharing the world with someone, learning their habits, reading their moods, knowing them in ways no one else does. It's going from stranger to someone you can't imagine life without. And yeah, love comes with risk, heartbreak, loss, pain, but I'm here for all of it, because if that's the price of loving deeply, I'll pay it. I'll take the uncertainty, I'll take the scars, I'll take the ache that comes with caring. What makes it hard sometimes isn't loving deeply, it's loving deeply in a world that pretends not to care. People act like being attached is weak, like wanting someone fully is desperate. They call it being nonchalant. They call it cool. They call it protecting yourself. But to me, it just feels empty. I don't want love that's casual. I don't want half interest. I don't want to pretend I wouldn't be devastated if I lost someone I truly cared about. I want to feel it, all of it. I want the kind of love where my heart is completely in. No exits, no backups, no pretending. And yeah. That makes me vulnerable. It means I get hurt easier. It means I feel things more intensely, but I'd rather feel everything than live numb just to look unbothered. Because loving deeply isn't weakness, it's courage. It takes guts to say, I want you fully. I'm choosing you. I'm not scared to care. And maybe that's why it feels lonely sometimes, because not everyone is built to love like that. Some people close their hearts after pain. Others keep theirs open, not because they're naive, but because they refuse to let disappointment turn them cold. You don't love deeply because it's easy. You love deeply because it's who you are. And even when it costs you, you'd still rather feel everything than live a life that feels hollow. You already know how this can end. You know love can break you. You know it can leave scars. You know it can take pieces you don't get back. And still, you choose it. Not because you're reckless, not because you're desperate, but because a life without love feels smaller than a life with heartbreak. You're not chasing perfection, you're chasing connection. The kind that makes ordinary moments feel alive, the kind that makes the world feel louder and quieter at the same time. And once you've felt even a glimpse of that, you can't pretend you don't want it anymore. So yeah, you risk it again, you open your heart again, you believe again. Not because you forgot the pain, but because you decided it wasn't stronger than your capacity to love. Being a lover boy doesn't mean you ignore reality. It means you face it and still choose love anyway. You're not asking for perfection, you're asking for presence, for a love that feels mutual, chosen, clear. And wanting that doesn't make you unrealistic, it makes you honest. Because once you know how deeply you can love, you stop settling for anything that asks you to dim that fire. So, no, the lover boy in you isn't dying, he's just waiting. And when the right love finally arrives, he'll be ready. What people don't realize is how much strength it takes to stay soft in a world that rewards detachment. It's easier to act unbothered, easier to keep things light, easier to pretend you don't care that much, but you were never built that way. You don't love halfway, you don't feel quietly. When you care, it shows in your effort, in your loyalty, and how present you are. And that's exactly what people try to shame out of you. They tell you you're too much, too attached, too intense. Like love is something you're supposed to ration. So sometimes you wonder if you should change, if caring less would protect you, if closing off would finally make things easier. But every time you try, it feels wrong, because pretending not to care cost you more than heartbreak ever did. You don't want to love where you're constantly monitoring yourself, where you have to downplay your feelings to seem cool. You want to love where effort isn't embarrassing, where loyalty isn't laughed at, where wanting someone fully isn't treated like a flaw. And yes, that kind of love is rare, not because it doesn't exist, but because not everyone has the capacity for it. Some people love with caution, some love with conditions, some love with one foot out the door. You love with your whole chest, and that means when it ends, it hurts differently. You don't just lose a person, you lose the future you already pictured, the version of yourself that only existed with them. But even after that pain, you don't harden, you don't turn cold, you don't become bitter, you grieve, and then you stay open. Not because you're naive, but because you understand something others don't. Love isn't dangerous, avoidance is. A life spent protecting yourself from ever being hurt is a life spent never being fully alive. So you keep choosing love, even when it costs you, even when it scares you. Because being a lover was never about guarantees, it was about courage. And no matter how many times the world tells you to be smaller, to care less, to guard your heart, you don't. Because the lover boy in you knows one truth: a heart that can love deeply is never something to be ashamed of. People who love like you often feel out of place, not because there's something wrong with them, but because the world isn't built for hearts that don't know how to love halfway. You walk into spaces where everyone is guarding themselves, where effort is calculated, where caring too much is treated like a mistake you should have learned from by now. And you can feel it, the hesitation, the emotional distance, the way people keep one foot out the door just in case. Meanwhile, you're standing there ready to choose someone fully if they'd just meet you halfway. That contrast can feel isolating. You start wondering if you're outdated, if your way of loving belongs to another time, another kind of world, because it feels like everyone else is playing it safe while you're still willing to risk your heart, and that makes you stand out. Not loudly, but deeply. You don't bond casually, you don't talk just to fill silence. When you connect, you notice things others miss, you remember details people forget, you show up in ways that don't disappear easily, and that kind of presence can be uncomfortable for people who aren't ready to be seen that closely. So they pull back, they joke about you caring too much, they call your intensity a lot, not because it is, but because they don't know how to match it. That's the part that hurts, realizing you're not too much, you're just too deep for people who only know how to skim the surface. You don't want love that feels convenient, you want love that feels intentional. You don't want someone who chooses you when it's easy. You want someone who chooses you because they mean it. And yeah, that narrows the field. It means you'll feel alone sometimes. It means you'll walk away more than you stay. It means you won't fit everywhere. But fitting everywhere was never the goal. The longing was. The lover boy in you isn't broken because he doesn't blend in. He just hasn't found the place where his kind of love is spoken fluently. And when he does, it won't feel like standing out anymore. It'll feel like coming home. Loving this deeply almost always comes with loneliness first. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because alignment takes time. When you love with your whole heart, you don't rush into anything just to feel chosen. You don't settle for attention that fades. You don't accept half presence just to avoid being alone. And that means there are stretches where it feels like everyone else has someone and you don't. You watch people pair up quickly, jump from connection to connection, call it love because it fills the space, and sometimes you wonder if you're being too patient, too selective, too unwilling to compromise. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not afraid of being alone. You're afraid of being half-loved. You don't want a relationship that feels like constant self-editing, where you have to mute your feelings, where your intensity is treated like a problem instead of a gift. So you wait, not passively, intentionally. You keep your heart open, but your standards intact. And that's the lonely part no one talks about. Choosing alignment over company, choosing depth over distraction, choosing to sit with the emptiness rather than fill it with something that won't last. Some nights it feels heavy. You question whether it's worth it, whether anyone will ever meet you at the level you're willing to love. But then you remember something important. The love you want can't be rushed. It needs two people who aren't scared of closeness, who don't joke about vulnerability, who don't treat commitment like a trap. And until that shows up, being alone is still safer than shrinking yourself. The lover boy in you isn't lonely because he's lacking. He's lonely because he's waiting for something real. And real love doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives aligned. The lover boy gets misunderstood a lot. People look at the way you love and assume it comes from neediness, from insecurity, from not knowing how to be alone. But that's never been true. You don't love deeply because you're afraid of being by yourself. You love deeply because you know how to be alone and still choose connection. There's a difference. You're not reaching for someone to fill a void. You're reaching because you want to share a life you already know how to carry on your own. But in a world obsessed with detachment, depth gets mislabeled, caring becomes too much, consistency becomes clingy, wanting clarity becomes pressure, so people tell you to chill, to play it cool, to act like you don't care as much as you do. And for a while you try. You soften your words, you hold back your feelings, you pretend you're less invested than your heart actually is. But it never feels right. Because loving quietly when you feel loudly starts to feel like lying to yourself. You don't want to be mysterious. You don't want to be distant. You don't want to be someone who treats love like a game of leverage. You want honesty. You want effort that isn't embarrassing. Commitment that isn't mocked. Connection that doesn't require you to minimize who you are. And the truth is, people who can't handle that were never going to meet you where you stand anyway. They confuse emotional availability with weakness because they've never felt safe enough to offer it themselves. So they pull away, they joke, they keep things light, not because you're too much, but because your depth asks them to be real. And not everyone is ready for that. The lover boy isn't misunderstood because he loves wrong. He's misunderstood because he loves honestly in a world that prefers control. And one day, someone won't ask you to tone it down. They won't call your care extra. They won't flinch at your intensity. They'll recognize it because they've been looking for someone who loves like you, without fear, without games, without holding back. One thing people get wrong about you is thinking you lose yourself in love, that you disappear, that you abandon who you are, just keep someone close. But that's not what loving deeply means to you. You don't give your heart away blindly. You give it intentionally. You're aware of the risk. You feel the fear. You know exactly how much it can hurt, and you still choose to love, not because you don't value yourself, but because you refuse to live guarded out of fear. There's a difference between protecting your heart and closing it. Closing it is pretending you don't care. Protecting it is knowing when to walk away without turning cold. And that's something you had to learn the hard way. You've loved people who couldn't meet you emotionally, who enjoyed your warmth but never offered shelter in return. And each time you didn't lose your softness, you refined it. You learned to notice effort, to listen to consistency, to believe actions more than potential. You learned that loving deeply doesn't mean tolerating confusion. It doesn't mean waiting forever. It doesn't mean accepting less than what you give. So now you love with boundaries, not walls, boundaries. You stay open, but you don't stay where you feel unseen. You express yourself, but you don't beg to be understood. You give fully, but only where there's room for you. That's growth. The lover boy in you didn't harden, he matured. He learned that protecting his heart doesn't mean dimming his light. It means choosing spaces where that light is welcomed. And that's why when you love again, it won't consume you. It'll expand you. Because this time you won't confuse intensity with imbalance. You'll recognize the difference between passion and peace. At some point, you stop mistaking chaos for passion. You stop thinking intensity means confusion. You stop believing love has to feel unstable to feel real. That shift doesn't happen overnight. It comes after loving people who kept you guessing, after giving effort that wasn't matched, after realizing how tired you were from loving alone in a two-person connection. Because for a long time, you thought love was supposed to feel urgent, heavy, like something you had to fight for. But real reciprocity feels different. It doesn't spike your anxiety. It doesn't make you question your place. It doesn't leave you replaying conversations or wondering if you asked for too much. Mutual love feels calm, not boring, steady. It feels like someone meeting your effort without keeping score, like someone choosing you without needing to be convinced. And at first, that kind of love almost feels unfamiliar because you're used to proving yourself, used to earning attention, used to being the one who cares more. So when someone shows up consistently, communicates clearly, and doesn't flinch at your depth, your body has to unlearn the chaos. You have to remind yourself that peace doesn't mean lack of passion. It means safety. You don't feel smaller around them. You don't feel like you're too much. You don't feel like you need to dim anything. Your intensity doesn't scare them. It reassures them. And that's when it clicks. Love was never supposed to feel like survival. It was supposed to feel like partnership. The lover boy doesn't stop loving deeply. He just stops loving unevenly. He stops pouring into places that don't pour back. He stops calling inconsistency timing, stops calling confusion chemistry, stops calling bare minimum effort. Because once you've tasted reciprocity, you can't go back. You can't unfeel what it's like to be met where you stand. And that's when loving deeply finally feels light. Loving deeply doesn't disappear. It just becomes selective. After everything you've felt, everything you've learned, you don't stop wanting connection. You stop giving it away too easily. You don't rush anymore. Not because you're guarded, but because you understand your capacity. You know how much you give, how present you are, how deeply you attach, and you're careful about where that kind of love lands. That doesn't mean you're closed off. It means you're intentional. You You don't entertain mixed signals. You don't romanticize inconsistency. You don't chase potential while ignoring reality. You pay attention now to effort, to follow through, to how someone shows up when things are calm, not just when things are exciting. Because you've learned that real love isn't proven in intensity alone. It's proven in consistency, and the people who are right for you won't be intimidated by that. They won't feel pressured by your depth. They won't joke about you caring too much. They won't need you to shrink to make them comfortable. They'll respect the way you love because they love the same way. That's the shift. You're not asking for more than before. You're just no longer accepting less. You still want closeness, still want loyalty, still want that kind of connection where the world feels quieter because someone chose you fully. But now you're patient with people, not with uncertainty. You're open to love, not to confusion. And that's how the lover boy grows. Not into someone colder, but into someone clearer. Someone who knows that loving deeply isn't about giving your heart to everyone who shows interest. It's about giving it to someone who knows how to hold it. Before the right love shows up, the lover boy is usually alone for a while. Not because he can't find connection, but because he refuses to force it. He's learned what happens when you fill space just to avoid loneliness, how quickly comfort turns into compromise, how easy it is to lose yourself when you accept something that doesn't fully meet you. So he chooses solitude instead, and solitude teaches him things love never could. It shows him who he is without anyone else's expectations, without adjusting his emotions, without holding back his intensity to make someone stay. He learns how to sit with himself, how to enjoy quiet, how to be fulfilled without external validation. And that's important because when you know how to be alone, you stop accepting love that feels like abandonment in disguise. During this time, he doesn't become detached, he becomes clear about what drains him, clear about what feels safe, clear about the kind of love that actually aligns with who he is. He stops craving attention, stops mistaking chemistry for compatibility, stops confusing being wanted with being understood. And yes, some days are heavy. He still wants connection, still imagines sharing moments with someone, still feels that pull toward closeness. But the difference now is that he won't trade his peace for proximity. He knows the right love won't require him to chase, won't ask him to question his worth, won't make him feel like he has to earn care. So he waits, not anxiously, not desperately, but confidently, because he understands something now. Being alone isn't a punishment. It's preparation. It's the space where he becomes exactly the version of himself the right love will recognize immediately. And when that love finally arrives, it won't feel like relief. It'll feel familiar. The lover boy was never naive. He knew what love could cost him. He knew how deeply it could hurt. He knew it could break him, leave marks he'd carry for years, and he chose it anyway. Not because he didn't understand the risk, but because a life without love felt smaller than a life with scars. For a long time, he thought loving this way was a flaw, something he'd eventually outgrow, something pain was supposed to cure, but it never did. Every heartbreak slowed him down, made him more careful, more aware, but it never killed that part of him that wanted connection, because loving it deeply was never a phase. It was part of his design. He wasn't meant to love casually. He wasn't built for half interest or emotional distance. He was built to choose one person and mean it. That's why it hurt more. That's why waiting felt heavier. That's why walking away took courage. But all of it shaped him. It taught him boundaries without bitterness, standards without arrogance, patience without self-abandonment. So now, when he looks back, he doesn't regret loving the way he did. He doesn't regret caring too much. He doesn't regret believing. He doesn't regret wanting something rare, because one day someone will meet him in that same place. They won't flinch at his intensity. They won't joke about his softness. They won't treat his loyalty like it's replaceable. They'll recognize it. And when that happens, everything will feel different. No anxiety, no confusion, No wondering where he stands, just clarity, effort that feels mutual, love that feels chosen, connection that doesn't require him to dim anything, and suddenly all the waiting makes sense. Not because it was easy, Dios, but because it protected him from settling for less than he was capable of giving. So no, the lover boy doesn't die, he doesn't disappear, he doesn't harden into someone unrecognizable. He just learns who deserves him, and when the right love finally arrives, he won't have to prove anything. He'll simply be met, and that's all he ever wanted.